Good morning. It is 9:49, and I'd like to call the Board of Psychology meeting to order and ask that Ms. Pruteau please call the roll.
Kasuga. Here. Cervantes.
Here.
Fu.
Aye.
Harbsheets.
Here.
Nystrom. Here. Phillips.
Here.
Riscate.
Here.
Rogers.
Here.
Tate.
Here.
Thank you. Roll is complete.
And quorum has been established. Thank you, Ms. Pruteau. The board will meet in closed session to conduct the annual evaluation of the executive officer, to discuss disciplinary matters including petitions for reinstatement, modification, or early termination, proposed decisions, stipulations, petitions for reconsideration, and remands. We will return to open session to resume the rest of the Board of Psychology agenda. Please check the webcast, and it will let you know when we will be back in session. Thank you. Yes, yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back from lunch, and we are ready to resume the Board of Psychology agenda. Ms. Pruteau, can you please call the roll?
Kasuga. Here. Cervantes. Here. Fu.
Aye.
Harbsheets.
Here.
Nystrom.
Here.
Phillips.
Here.
Riscate.
Here.
Rogers.
Here.
Tate.
Here.
Roll is complete.
Thank you, and quorum is established. We will jump right over to agenda item number 19, public comment for items not on the agenda. The board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. Before I invite speakers to come forward for public comment, I would ask individuals making comments to not discuss the specifics, including names, as to pending complaints, pending licensing applications, or pending disciplinary actions that may come before the board for a decision. This refers to current and pending complaints and possible future complaints. Such discussions are considered ex parte communications, as they could provide information to the members that is outside of the record in violation of the Administrative Procedure Act. While there may be a desire to engage in further discussion with comments presented during this time, the board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide to place it on the agenda. If there is a speaker before you who expresses thoughts that are extremely similar to yours, please feel free to verbally agree with previous speakers instead of repeating the exact same comment. And if you have a comment, please have a seat in front of me, in front of the microphone, and happy to give each speaker 2 minutes. If you have a comment, please step forward. I do not see any movement. Before I move on to agenda item number 20, Mr. Vice President has reminded me about one item. You will see board members looking at computer screens throughout this afternoon. All of our agenda materials are on the computers, and so this is how we are referencing all of the board materials. So just a reminder. Agenda item number 20 is Outreach and Communications Committee report in consideration of and possible action on committee recommendations. Number A is the strategic plan action plan update. So the board met for strategic plan action planning on December 3rd and 4th of 2018. The board ratified the 2019 to 2023 strategic plan at the February 2019 board meeting. And we will be meeting for the strategic plan update planning in December 2023 to create another strategic 5-year plan. And this is just an information only. Did I cover everything, Ms. Hork? Any board comments or questions about this item? I'd like to open it up for public comment regarding this item. Thank you. Moving on to item 20B, which is the social media update. Mr. Glass-Steagall, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, board members. Included in your meeting materials, beginning on page 59, is the agenda item 20B, which is the social media update. This provides our Facebook and Twitter information. Of note, due to changes with Facebook's meta analytics, board staff is no longer able to track the likes or followers over time. Staff is able to provide the current number of Facebook followers as of now, and the previous charts of likes over time and followers over time have been removed. In addition, we are only able to see the most popular posts within 90 days, which was provided in your materials. In addition to your materials, we have our total followers. The most popular post is from July 8th, 2022. And for Twitter, we have the followers, how many we are following, and the total tweets, and followers over time. C of the meeting materials, which Facebook was A, Twitter is B, and C is the webcast. This is still under the social media memo update. We have all of our board meeting webcast views from 2021 and 2022, along with committee meetings. This is informational purposes only, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glass-Steagall. Is there any board comment or questions regarding this report? Seeing none, I'd like to open up public comment for this report. If you have a comment, please step forward and have a seat. I'm seeing no movement. Thank you, Mr. Glass-Steagall, but don't move because the next item is the website statistics update, please.
Thank you. In your meeting materials on page 62 is agenda item 20C, which is the website update. This has information between January 1, 2022 and September 5th, 2022. That's our top 5 pages that were viewed, as well as views of about 10 or so different website pages, and it's got them quarterly for from January 1 through September 5th. Down below, we have our legislative and regulatory advisories and the views to date from the publishing of those on our website. This is also informational purposes only, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you again. Is there any board comment regarding the website statistics update? I'd like to open up public comment for a website statistics update. If you have a comment, question, please step forward and have a seat, please. Thank you. We're moving on to agenda item 20D. This is the update on the newsletter. The Fall Journal newsletter is included in the meeting materials, and the Winter Journal goes out December 2022. That's exciting. Anything else you wanted to add, Ms. Sorick? Any board comment regarding the current newsletter or the upcoming newsletter? Or newsletter comments in general? Thank you. I'd like to open up public comment regarding the newsletter update. We're moving on to agenda item 20E, outreach activities update. Ms. Sorick, please.
Included in the meeting materials are the stakeholder meetings for the current fiscal year, and they're all included there, and I'm available for any questions the board or the public might have.
Thank you. Ms. Sorick, any board comment regarding outreach activities? You guys are so quiet after lunch. I'd like to open up public comment for outreach activities. If you have a public comment, please come forward and have a seat. We are moving on to agenda item 20F, which is the presentation by the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards on their Center for Data and Analysis on Psychology Licensure in Focus Edition. We've included this presentation that was given to the Outreach and Communications Committee. The presentation is in your agenda materials. If you have questions, we do have Dr. Horn, who has made herself available. Want to add anything to that right now? Okay.
Just that it was a really interesting compilation of data, and it's something that was a grant-funded project, I believe. So it was really interesting data, and I'm hoping if we have any policy initiatives where we have to compare between states, we can utilize this as a good foundation for that. So.
Thank you. Any board comment regarding this item? Thank you. I'd like to open up public comment for this item. If you have a public comment for 20F, please come forward and have a seat, please. Dr. Horn. You got on the bottom. Yeah.
Thank you. Jackie Horn, I'm with the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards. I'd just like to give a little plug for this In Focus. One of the parts of In Focus is what has heretofore been called Psych Book. All the licensing boards answer questions about different aspects of how they function. And one piece of that is something that the Department of Education requires all professional graduate programs in the United States. So it's not just psychology, it's law, medicine, nursing, whatever. Requires all accredited programs to list in their materials whether or not attending that graduate program will allow that person to get licensed in any state. So it's very important that that information is there because so that graduate programs can use it, but also students can, or potential students can go and take a look and see where they're thinking about going. So I just want to put a little plug in. I thank California because you answered all the questions, and you always do, and I really appreciate that. But it's a very important part of that overall In Focus. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Horn. Any other public comment regarding this item before we move on? We are moving on to agenda item 20G. This is For Your Peace of Mind, a Consumer's Guide to Psychological Services. Mr. Burke, are you presenting this item today?
I'm going to prepare the computer for the slide now.
Oh, perfect.
So what we might want to do is for those folks that are under the screen, so you can see the language, if you'd like to move your seats over this direction. Or you could sit up front here.
Come out right.
So,
We have a screen here.
I can see it here.
okay. Oh, you have, oh, never mind.
Typing now, I'm not able to present the microphone. I'll be typing up the changes
Okay,
made from the memo.
perfect. I can present. Okay, so we are tag teaming today, Mr. Burke and myself. Mr. Burke on the scribe, and I will just introduce the memo. So in September of 2021, the Outreach and Communications Committee met and delegated to Dr. Rogers, legal counsel, and staff to review the For Your Peace of Mind publication. Dr. Rogers graciously spent some ample time with our staff to go through some suggested edits, and those were presented at the Outreach and Communications Committee meeting in September of 2022. And included in the packet is the suggested amended language. I know Ms. Marks had an additional amendment, but I'm not sure if you guys want to go just page 1, are there any edits? Page 2, are there any edits? We can go that way. And then the request would be for approval to move forward and work with the publications unit on whatever agreed upon language the board comes up with.
Let's go page by page. I think we did that in the committee meeting, and it worked well.
Okay, so on page 1, starting with the table of contents introduction, are there any suggested edits? Dr. Harpsheets?
I wondered if we could talk about using the term psychologist and therapist interchangeably. I think it's important to be really clear with the public that psychologists are psychologists, and that probably the BBS is using therapists more often. And I just wanted to, they're different professions. And I wanted to avoid confusion in the public, but I'd be interested in hearing other people's perspective on that if it feels important.
I'd prefer the use of the word psychologist as opposed to using them interchangeably, although we do fill that role, obviously.
Right.
But when we speak about it, it's going to be unclear whether we're talking about all therapists or we're just talking about psychologists.
So would you like to replace all reference to
Yes.
therapist to psychologist?
I think
Okay.
that'd be clearer for the public.
Okay.
Just under the table of contents introduction, as we go to strategic planning for next year, there's a potential that this mission statement might be revised. And so I'm curious if this is something that we can proactively say, this is current for this publication, but for the next printing, that you will just automatically incorporate any revised mission if that does come about.
We could definitely do that. I think for printed copies, it will have a revision date. Something that's come up even with the strategic plan are that there are former board member names. And it's always whatever the board makeup was that came up with the strategic plan, just for, I guess, historical. But we can always, for the online version, we can change the mission to, reflect whatever the board comes up with at the next strategic plan.
How fast do you think this will go to publication?
When we did our Therapy Never Includes Sexual Behavior brochure, I want to say it was maybe 3 or 4 months total at most. They're usually pretty quick.
Okay.
It's just going through, internal, legal review, and then what the graphics are going to look like more than anything. So. Any other changes on page 1? Okay, moving on to page 2. Any changes?
I have a couple of changes. On where it says, outside of working directly with clients, psychologists work with organizations or businesses, I would suggest changing "or" to "and." And my second one is where there's a list of things that psychologists do. I thought it might be helpful to add, this isn't the right word, but career, we do work with people around career evaluations. We're not evaluating their career, but I don't know if you'd call it career counseling or what would be the best way, but I think that that's useful for people to know that's something that we do.
Are there any recommendations on how to word that?
Usually it's thought of as career counseling.
Okay.
I think that's the popular term for it,
Yeah.
although it may not really encompass. Exactly.
Right. But our regulations do accept degrees in counseling psychology now too, so.
Any other corrections for page 2?
Should we include couples therapy too? Couples and family therapy?
Yeah, good. Individual, couples, family, and group therapy. Yeah, I think that's essential.
Dr. Phillips, that is in the first paragraph.
This is psychological testing.
Oh, under psychological services, because it's in the narrative part above. So I didn't know if you wanted it.
Page 1.
Top of page,
Top of page
Top
2.
of page 2.
and then the list is for psychological testing.
So for testing, diagnostic evaluations is not included?
It should be included.
As well as forensic evaluations, because they're not just all child custody evaluations.
Yep. You getting that, Antoinette?
Are you getting that,
Oh.
Mr. Burke?
Forensic evaluations.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not watching the live.
Diagnostic?
You got career counseling and forensic evaluations, and then we also have diagnostic evaluation.
Diagnostic, yes.
I would put diagnostic evaluations on top, but I think,
First.
yeah, before intelligence and achievement evaluation.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, just one quick question, just a grammatical question. I see that in some places evaluations is lowercase and in other places it's uppercase. So just for consistency.
Mr. Burke, can you put a comment box for that? We can do a document check for that.
Just on that same vein, following Dr. Rogers' lead on that, it seems like we're not capitalizing after the first letter. So like career counseling may not necessarily be capitalized, but we are obviously capitalizing when things are hyphenated because they represent one word or one phrase. So just piggybacking off of Dr. Rogers' astute observations.
Any other thoughts for page 2?
And just for an additional peace of mind, no pun intended, it's Friday. The publications unit will also be reviewing the document for any additional technical and grammatical things before it's printed. So that will be a stopgap in case, we miss something here today. Moving on to the next page. Are there any suggestions?
There's the underline, ask questions about your therapy or other services from your provider. And I think the public is not really familiar with the use of the word provider, and I would substitute psychologist instead of provider. And then you're going to run through, anytime therapist is in there, replace that with psychologist, right? So that's in here too.
Mm-hmm. You, sorry, just to clarify, Dr. Harpsheets, you would like us to replace provider with psychologist as well throughout the document?
Yes, because I think people are not familiar. We're familiar with it, but I don't think the public is, they would wonder what that meant.
Perfect, thank you. Any additional changes?
One question where it says report unethical or illegal behavior by a therapist, we'll change that to a psychologist, but should you say to the board, report it to, just specify who they should report it to?
Trying to see where you're at. Okay, of the next, okay, report unethical, illegal behavior by a therapist. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So we would put report unethical and illegal behavior by the psychologist to the board. That makes sense. If you scroll down, it's on the next page, Mr. Burke. Right there, report. It's the fourth bullet. There you go. And I want to say we've referred to the board at the beginning, but
Ease of reference, should we just say Board of Psychology?
I think in the table of contents introduction, we can say the Board of Psychology parens board, and that will, if we say board throughout, I mean, that's something we can do interchangeably.
I'm just thinking for consumer, they're not necessarily memorizing technical definitions as they're reading through. So to make it explicit as a Board of Psychology so they know who to contact.
Got it. So on that in particular, that makes sense to put Board of Psychology. But is the board comfortable with adding board and parens in case we do say board anywhere else in the document at the very beginning? So Mr. Burke, at the very top of the first page, under the table of contents introduction, after the Board of Psychology protects, yeah, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Any additional comments on page 4?
I had one. You know, with the part right under where we were looking, receive a copy of your records or have a copy transferred to any therapist or would be psychologist or agency you choose. Well, even though technically they can, there are times where a psychologist might make a recommendation to provide just a summary if there's a concern that that might be harmful. So is it problematic if we make this blanket statement, or would we want to say, you know, except in certain exceptional circumstances, or somehow qualify that? I don't know. What do you think, Dr. Phillips?
I just think maybe we just say request a copy of your records.
Okay, that
Then they
sounds
can
good.
get into all
Request
the
a copy, and
details of
then they can, yeah. That takes care of it.
Still on page 4, the line about receive a second opinion at any time about your therapy or your therapist's methods. I know it's going to be changed to psychologist, but I'm wondering if we should include second opinion about assessments, therapy, or intervention, or your psychologist's intervention. Because I think that this is just therapy focused, and there's, like, you know, not accounting for assessments as well.
Purpose methods, assessment results, or?
I would say that the word receive seems to imply that somehow the structure's in place where you're going to get a second opinion automatically. I think seek a second opinion might be better.
The word,
Yeah, that's better too.
oh, or solicit, Mr. Fu. That was good.
To make it a little more general for members of the public, would it also work to say solicit a second opinion at any time about your psychologist's methods
For psychologist services?
or services?
Or interventions or services.
If services works, that might be a little more user-friendly for the public.
What's encompassing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We don't have to write everything down.
yeah,
Okay,
yes.
that sounds good.
I still kind of prefer the word seek as opposed to solicit,
I agree.
because it's an active process seeking a second opinion. I don't know what people think about that.
I think solicit can have other meanings and convey something different, and that might be problematic.
Let's throw seek in there. Any other comments for this section, this page?
Moving on to page,
I mean, I'm just thinking about whether to just say receive a second opinion at any time about. I guess you it's fine. I was thinking about using your or about, the the psychologist services, but yeah, yours work. Sorry, go on.
no, that's okay. Page 5, any,
I have a
Dr.
few.
Hopkins?
I know I have a few. In the first section, to be licensed, I think we should, if that statement to have a qualifying doctorate degree, I think we should make the wording there consistent with what the regulations actually say, because sometimes we get requests for licensure with a degree in education, but it isn't specialized in psychology. So, for example, that would be misleading. So I think we should make this wording consistent with the regulations if we're going to give that much information. Or make kind of a general statement about, because we could do school psychology too, and that's not in here. So I would say my preference would be to make the wording consistent with the regulations.
okay, I am going to pull up 2914. So we have it. And let's see.
Can I add to Dr. Harpsheet's comment and perhaps maybe a sentence directing a person to our website, just in case there should be any, I don't expect any changes given how long it takes to make changes, but I think having a reference to the website might be helpful for individuals should there be a timely change that we may not be able to have a printed publication reflect that. So additional information on how a psychologist is licensed can be found on the Board of Psychology's website.
I think we maybe put after the website at www.psychology.ca.gov.
So if you're gonna give the reference, I still would strike the part then, or in education, because I think that could be pretty misleading. Like, I have a doctorate in education, why can't I apply for licensure? And, the answer is it's not in a focus on psychology or however that school labels it.
I'm wondering because I'm looking at subparagraph A of 2914, and it's pretty lengthy in its verbiage. And if I'm a consumer and
Yeah.
I'm reading it, I might not quite get it. And I'll tell you, it just says, let's see, in a doctoral program in psychology with the field of specialization in clinical counseling, school consulting, forensic, industrial, or organizational psychology, or in education with the field of specialization in counseling psychology, educational psychology, or school psychology at a nationally accredited or approved institution. So there might be a way to
Condense that, though,
condense
but,
that.
but to really focus, that it has to be in a psychology focus.
Well,
we
I
can
have
do
a
that.
suggestion.
Yeah.
Rather than going through all the specification, just say have earned a qualifying doctoral degree from
In
an
psychology.
accredited institution, period.
Say it again.
Have earned a qualifying doctorate degree from an accredited institution.
So
period.
qualifying takes care of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
And you don't, because they're going to get lost in the weeds of that, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, my eyes kind of glaze over when I hear it, so.
Yeah.
Not that it's not important.
Yeah, I like that. That takes care of it.
I think we should still specify that, like, you have earned a qualifying doctorate degree in psychology, because the ones that are specified here are specializations within psychology. So I think just adding in psychology as well.
Yeah. That would be good.
And would you like to keep the PhD, PsyD, and EDD, or take that out? Okay.
We
I
can
think
keep
it's
it.
true. It's true, yeah. So for somebody, it's a doctoral degree. It just, for people who don't really know, this is what these doctoral degrees.
Yeah.
I think that having the degrees is a nice reference point for a consumer if they don't have any idea about our profession.
The information you've added about additional information on how a psychologist is licensed can be found on the board's website. It might be helpful to have a particular page, because I'm just looking at the board's website. I don't find a page under the consumer tab that describes it. There is one actually under the applicants tab that might actually be kind of helpful. But otherwise, if you just send a consumer to the board's website to look specifically about how a psychologist is licensed, they're going to have to start piecing it together. So the applicant tab that has an overview of the licensure exam process might actually be useful for
Maybe the flow
consumer?
chart. Remember we were talking earlier about this flow chart, and to that, directly to that page, because that really describes the whole licensing process.
That's what Ms. Marks has up.
Oh, is that what you just said? Oh,
Or
sorry.
that's what she has up on her
on
computer.
my
Oh,
screen,
oh,
She didn't
okay.
say it,
So
but-
that,
Yeah.
so, because if I were a consumer, I don't think I would naturally go to the applicant section, I'd go to the consumer section. So maybe putting in the specific page, or developing a page like that for the consumer tab, which is a whole other.
I do hesitate to list specific link pages because pages go dark during website refreshes and overhauls. And so if we can be more directional by perhaps naming like under applicants or like a descriptor, but I always get concerned with links because, especially if you're linking to a PDF, because those go dead fairly quickly, so.
Maybe just to the applicant's page, and then when they go there, that's the first link. So if you can just replace the homepage with the applicant's page link. Yep. Looks good. Okay, any other changes on this page? Okay, moving on to page 6. Any edits? Okay.
I have a question. Under identify an area, I've noticed that there's a change in, I think I'm seeing substance use be more frequently used in the field rather than substance abuse. And so I wonder if this is an appropriate time to update that.
That makes good sense.
So under substance abuse, to strike abuse to use.
Or we could put use and abuse.
What did you say?
I'm sorry.
Oh, use and abuse?
Use and abuse.
Does the DSM-5 have substance use disorder? Is that what it refers to now? So it's not abuse? Yeah.
So it's substance use and abuse?
I think the common parlance among consumers is still substance abuse.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So including both words is all encompassing, I think.
And for purposes of discipline, the statute still refers to substance abuse, substance abusing licensees. So that's consistent, keeping some of that terminology. Any other changes on this page? Okay, moving on to the next page, page 7. And I believe, yes, I was going to say, we've deleted all of it, but there are a few.
I'm sorry, Ms. Sort, could we go back to the place where the hyperlink is included? Where it says, check each psychologist license. Should we change that link so that it goes straight to the verify page instead of having the instructions in order for it to be consistent with the previous link?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Do we want to say link on the Department of Consumer Affairs website now, since it's technically linking to DCA, not to our board?
That's a good edit.
Yeah. So it's actually maybe saying, check each psychologist license to confirm a current and active license on the Department of Consumer Affairs website, link. This will allow you to view license status as well as prior public administrative or disciplinary action of any.
And just a S after the B in website. Any additional changes on this page?
I have one question. When it says ask people you know and trust for the recommendations, should we specifically be mentioning your healthcare providers? Like your medical doctor or? And that's,
I think we had a discussion about this when we talked about this section, and I think because it's such a challenge finding a provider, that sometimes, because if, let's say, for example, you are looking for someone who accepts insurance and your healthcare provider might not be under this, well, I mean, presumably they would be under the same insurance provider, but they might not have like a referral list. I think we talked about that being a potential challenge, but we can add it.
I mean, it's an alternative source they can go to. I don't know if in seeing the words, ask people you know and trust, whether that necessarily in their mind brings them to asking a healthcare provider. And honestly, I think healthcare providers may be better informed sometimes.
So you would just add to include healthcare professionals or healthcare providers, or?
Including your healthcare provider
Yeah.
after
Do it.
recommendations? That way it doesn't, prohibit you from going to a
And you can ask your friend.
family member or friend.
Yeah.
Mr. Burke, do you have that? We need a comma after recommendations. And an S after provider. Okay. And I think we've done periods at the end of the other bullets, so just to be consistent. Okay. Moving on to the next page. Any changes on page 7? Okay, moving on to page 8. And that highlight is there for what page it's going to be on. That may change depending on how this is printed. Does anyone have any edits on this page? Okay, moving on to the next page. How to prepare for your first appointment. Any edits here?
I have under the individual therapy section, I think you have to go down after all the line outs, right down here, and stop right there, and where it says, additionally, the psychologist will inquire about your personal, intellectual, and emotional history. I think we should add personal, intellectual, and medical and emotional history, because I think the standard of care is to understand what the medical history is, and a lot of times consumers are not familiar. They think, well, I'm coming to a psychologist. Why do I have to tell you about my medical history? So I think it's helpful to add that in there, and they're less surprised.
Okay. Any more comments on page 10?
This is more of a formatting comment. It looks like the rest of the document is written in justified format, and this one is on the left side. So just making sure that's consistent.
And that's definitely, I'm thinking they'll probably be doing this in another program, so
Okay.
at least the alignment and stuff, that'll be handled for
Okay.
sure on the back end. But thank you. Any questions or comments about page 11?
I have a question, and so on the individual therapy section, as part of Dr. Harbsheet's sentence, so additionally, the psychologist will inquire about your personal, intellectual, medical. So is intellectual better than developmental history?
I think
It's intellectual history?
developmental sounds more encompassing.
I
Yeah.
think developmental sounds better.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, let's change the intellectual to developmental.
Okay.
Dr. Rogers, are
This
we
it's just
butchering
a-
your language?
No, no, no. I'm just, I'm just thinking about what will be more easily understood by consumers. So I think as psychologists, we understand what developmental history is, but I don't know if a layperson might. So that's
Got it.
what I was just thinking about.
You want to get a
Like-
consensus
No,
on?
I was actually thinking both can work, right? Because I think developmental can include intellectual functioning, but I would be fine with keeping both of them. I just, again, wonder if consumers would know what that meant if they read developmental.
Family and school background and,
Family history?
yeah, family history.
Social history.
Yeah, social-
Family history.
Mhm.
Emotional history. Yeah. Simpler words.
Yeah, because even intellectual, I don't think is like understandable for, I mean, I don't exactly know what that means. Is that like your history of IQ scores, so it's kind of like, I think what's more user-friendly would be background, family history, social history.
So personal history, family history, social history, emotional, like all of those things, correct, in the list?
Social-emotional, there's,
Yeah. We put those two words together, but I don't know if lay people put those two words together.
okay, got it.
So,
Personal, family, social, history? Oh, social. Oh, just take out the developmental. Oh, did you want to keep the developmental?
I think we should keep it.
Okay. Moving on to page 11.
Sorry, I'm being difficult. Under individual therapy, when you're saying healing from PTSD symptoms, I don't think you use PTSD. You don't spell out post-traumatic stress disorder in any other part of the document. And while I'm assuming it's general parlance, but we know what PTSD stands for, I think it might be helpful for us to spell that out since it's the first time it appears.
Rather than
That's
using a
Dr.
diagnostic specifier, why not say trauma or trauma-related
Yeah.
symptoms?
That works wonderfully as well.
I just wanted to add, if when you're doing kind of the, like, find and replace, and you put provider, we have to be careful, because when we say healthcare provider or insurance provider, those are fine. And so if you're going to substitute provider with psychologist, we have to be careful they don't substitute it in those other situations.
Got it.
I was thinking about that.
Similarly, under group therapy, ADHD skills group, you can just put social skills group or, I mean, there's already social skills group, but like if you want to change that to more of like what, kind of like, is this for ADHD skills group for executive functioning, or? I mean, I thought they were talking about removing diagnoses, like acronyms and stuff, and just talking about more general stuff.
And are you referring to the ADHD, the paragraph down below? Okay.
What would you recommend? Is there a more kind of plain language, user-friendly?
Behavioral management groups? I don't know.
Okay.
Behavioral management skills groups.
I don't know if that's a lay person is going to take that in, but we could just say skills group and leave
Yeah, skills
out the
group, yeah.
ADHD,
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
kind of
Okay.
gives a feel for what it could be.
Okay.
So are we just going to say, are we taking on ADHD skills group and social skills group?
I was going to say, we have skills group
and
twice, so let's just take out ADHD skills group
Okay.
and leave social skills group.
Yeah. Those are just examples, and
Right.
I think the most common one is
Right.
social skills group.
And now that we only have 2 examples, maybe just put "and" instead of the comma.
I'm sorry.
can
I was
add-
just thinking about different types of groups consumers might be looking for. What about a work stress group? So that's
Coping
not
skills group.
diagnostic.
Work,
What's that?
work
Coping skills
balance
group.
group.
Coping skills
Oh,
group.
coping skills group. Yeah. Either of those.
I'm curious about this group's response to the inclusion of some clarifying language with regard to some of the conversations we've heard in the past, particularly in the licensure committee when I used to sit on it, around the distinguishing roles between a school psychologist and educational psychologist. And I know, Dr. Harpsheets, you had a lot of fantastic comments about what's the appropriate line. And so I wonder if this document could be a helpful tool to be educational in that setting. So I'm not sure where this would go, either individual or group, but, oh yeah, and that's right, Dr. Kasuga, having been working at a regional center, also has a lot of great thoughts too. And so would welcome maybe if folks feel comfortable using this document as one way to educate folks about that.
That's an amazing intro, because one of the comments that I have here is we have an intro on what to do to prepare for an individual therapy and group therapy, but not to prepare for an assessment appointment. So I think we can definitely use this document to, inform the public on what to expect when going to a psychologist for an assessment.
So the question I will ask is, I suspect that our assistant executive officer is trying to track these changes. Can I ask that perhaps Dr. Harpsheets and Dr. Kasuga work with staff to craft language that might be appropriate for inclusion on this?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea because of the confusion. You bring up a good point that we've seen so much confusion about who does what.
Yes.
Where do we draw that line? And that would be extremely helpful. Thank you.
I don't
That
mean
will
to be
spare our
the fly in the ointment, but is there a clear line?
Well, it's, we
Because
have
you've
to
had
find
discussions
someplace.
with these groups, and I
Right,
got the
right,
impression there wasn't a clear line.
right. Well,
Well, there is some clear line in terms of when it comes to like the LEP. Is that what you're talking about? The licensed educational psychologist, they can only do diagnosis as it relates to educational setting. It's in the law for their particular designation. So it's not necessarily within the Board of Psychology, but we can talk about the ones that we do, which is like we provide assessments for diagnostic purposes.
I think one of the questions is, where does that line get blurred when people go beyond providing that assessment and begin to provide therapy? And that's what I think you were referring to, Mr. Fu, about educating the public on what psychologists do versus the educational psychologists who are licensed by the Board of Behavioral Science, which is different.
I wonder if maybe we can use this opportunity to distinguish the counseling to therapy, because counseling is common in an education setting. Is there something we can add to that, or some concept just to distinguish the two? So,
Did you want to say something, Dr. Phillips? I see you.
Yeah, I'm grimacing. It's not always clear where the line that divides, because it's about how people describe things. So I would say if somebody was coming to me for couples therapy, you're coming for couples therapy, but other therapists, other psychologists might say you're for couples counseling.
I see
Like
what
the
you're
career counseling part
Okay.
too.
Oh, that's right.
And then when our regulations changed, we talked specifically about accepting counseling psychology degrees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right, we did.
So
Okay.
it's kind of broadened.
Sorry. Forgot about that.
So
Yeah.
if I may just take a step back, I just want to, the focus of this particular publication is, you know, a consumer's guide to psychological services. So I think what we have talked about is having a stakeholder meeting with Board of Behavioral Sciences. It's on our to-do list once we tackle our timeframes issue. And what we have talked about is a byproduct of that stakeholder meeting, doing a joint publication with BBS on, for consumers in particular, so they know when they're working with a school psychologist, an LEP, someone who's a licensed psychologist, what people can and can't do. And then there's also outside people doing some intellectual assessments that I think we've seen in enforcement, and they're not licensed or registered by anybody, but they took some course where they got certified to do some testing. So I think if we can kind of focus on this being for Consumers Guide to Psychological Services and a little less of this is what this person can or can't do, it's like what to expect once you're engaging in psychological services, that might help focus this particular publication. Not to say that we can't tackle those other issues in another publication, and I'm not trying to postpone it, but I just want to make sure that this is focused kind of in that particular area, if that makes sense.
I think it can still be focused. I think that there's still a need to discuss just what to expect. It doesn't have to be long, but you know, I think that it's good information for people that are seeing a psychologist for assessment to know what to expect.
And I think it would be really nice to have, since we're doing individual, group, and then assessment, I would like to add that with someone from your expertise. And I'm wondering, because I know we have a full agenda today, I'm wondering if we can work with Dr. Harpsheets and Dr. Krasuga and then bring this back to the February meeting. This is a big publication, and we don't often update our publications, so we want to make sure we do it right and thoughtfully. So I would suggest, if the board's okay with it, to kind of take a little extra time and make sure we have the right content added.
And avoid the pitfalls of areas in which there aren't agreements between the boards necessarily as to where the line of demarcation is, so that at a later point in time, that will get more clarified. Perhaps it gets changed in this publication, or it's a separate publication or whatever.
Well, avoiding the gray area so we don't step into a pitfall as a board when it sounds like there's something coming down the line where we have an opportunity to delve really into it.
Yeah, and if we could do a joint publication with BBS, I think it would be a really helpful gesture to consumers to really know where the line is drawn and where to go if they have questions.
So regarding this document, do you want to continue, finish this document, and
and then
Dr.
bring
Harfsheets and
back
Dr.
the.
Kasuga bring the assessment blurb to insert?
Yep.
Okay, so let's continue then.
Assessment, I think it's individual, group, and then assessment, I think is what Ms. Orick said.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Coping skills. Group. Thank you.
Okay. So moving on to page 12.
I have some comments on that.
Okay.
Where the word engage in any type of sexual contact, should we change contact to behavior? Sexual behavior?
Thank you, Dr. Harpsheets. I brought this issue to Ms. Sorica a few days ago in light of SB 401 and the changes there. Some language that we thought of was potentially to say any type of sexual contact or sexual behavior, comma, which includes communications or other physical contact, comma, with a current patient, et cetera.
Oh, okay, that sounds good. My next one under violate a patient's confidentiality.
Dr. Harpsheets, just before you,
Yeah.
if you can hold on
Yeah.
that comment 1 second, so Mr. Burke can get that change.
Would you like me to repeat that? Okay, you have sexual behavior, comma, after behavior, which includes communications and other physical contact, comma.
Okay, Dr. Harpsheets, go ahead.
Okay, so I was concerned where it just stops at violate a patient's confidentiality, because there are clearly exceptions. And so maybe if we could add violate a patient's confidentiality except under certain conditions, or something that indicates that there are times where their confidentiality will be violated. And I mean, we can explain that your.
Which circumstances?
Mandated reporting.
Yeah, I mean, or your psychologist should explain those to you prior to beginning treatment or something.
There are circumstances under which there are exceptions to confidentiality that you should discuss with your psychologist,
Yeah, yeah,
because it's not a violation, right?
right, right. And then talks about dating a patient's relative, it talks about dating a patient's parent, where it says engage in multiple relationships, including but not limited to employing patients, socializing with patients, and dating a patient's parent. So maybe instead of parent, you might say a patient's relative or significant other.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just have one more, where it says abandon their patients. That's a hot button because they're, it sounds like it communicates, a psychologist can't walk away from the treatment relationship. When in Standard 10 of the Psychologist Ethics Code, it does say under certain conditions, one can terminate the relationship with the client. And additionally, so I guess I'm struggling with the word abandon, because the psychologist can leave the treatment relationship, can end the treatment relationship under certain situations, but needs to provide referrals and do various things to provide for some continuity of care. So, and abandon such a provocative word. I'm just wondering what might be a better way to say that.
Unethical termination of client relationship?
Yeah, but is that too complex for the public to understand? Because that's true.
Unprofessional. Well, that also gets a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think I think what you mentioned, the continuity of care piece is really important. And I think continuity of care is fairly layperson. So maybe appropriate.
Oh, how about end the treatment relationship without providing for continuity of care?
Yes. That's good.
I like that.
How about inserting the word plan after continuity of care?
Plan for continuity of care.
So, Mr. Burke, after continuity of care, maybe insert the word plan. And I just want to say this is incredibly hard to ever, if anybody had to do life edits with group people. So thank you, Mr. Burke, because this is incredibly difficult. So thank you.
Couldn't do it.
I'm wondering if Ms. Marks brought up a point about there being a mutual agreement about termination. If we add the word premature to end, so it's not just ending, because that could be a mutual agreement. Or something similar. Yeah, and then that way it sounds sudden.
Shouldn't it be a continuity of care plan?
Any other changes on page 14?
Just a question about the grammar. So are we saying providing for a continuity of care plan or providing a continuity of care plan? Okay. Thank you.
Or should it say providing for continuity of care, period?
I think just saying providing for continuity of care makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
My question would be, does that mean that the psychologist is expected to say, here you go, I have provided that you're going to now see Dr. So-and-so. So I just want the consumer to know that there could be, here's referrals, et cetera. It does that, and not like, oh, you have to do this for me.
We could say EG and say a referral list.
Well, we could say without providing options for continuity of care. Without providing options for continuity of care?
Yeah, or if we go back to the plan, that doesn't mean that the person is going to execute the plan. Here's the plan we have for you, but they may not follow up on it, which takes the onus away from the psychologist.
I don't know, having terminated patients before for one reason or another, I may have given them referrals. I don't know that I've given them some kind of integrated plan for continuity of care. So it sounds much more formal to me when we say, we use the word plan. Without appropriately providing for continuity of care? I don't know. I like options.
Yeah.
Because that's typically, 9 times out of 10, people are going to have checked to see that there are referrals available for them that they think are appropriate, and then give them that list of providers, sometimes only one provider because clients get confused if you give them too many, and say, come back if that one doesn't work out. So, I mean, but you want to give them some option if there's treatment that needs to still go on.
Dr. Phillips, maybe perhaps replacing providing with discussing options, provide a little bit more room. I think I'm hearing a concern from you that there's a level of structure that could vary dependent on
The circumstances.
each circumstance. So maybe instead of a provision or providing options, you're discussing options.
Yeah.
I think the word providing makes it feel very formal, and we might be boxed in a little bit.
Okay, moving on to the next page. Are there any edits on page 15? I believe this was all struck. Any disagreements about I think it's all struck pretty much from here on out. Okay.
Any other board comment regarding this document before I open it up for public comment?
I just want to thank staff and Dr. Rogers for the time that they put into this. And I especially appreciate the material that has been struck, because I'm not sure that it really helps the consumer as much as kind of covers a lot of bureaucratic information. So I think it's much better in this form than it was ever in the original form. And appreciate all the hard work that went into it.
Thank you. And I echo Dr. Phillips. Thank you, Dr. Rogers. And I'd like to open up agenda item 20G for public comment. If you have a comment or suggestions, please have a seat. Welcome. And at the base of the microphone, there should be a button that turns green.
Hi, it's Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman from the California Psychological Association. It's so nice to see everybody again in person after a very long time. So I want to start out, I just wanted to thank you. I agree. I want to thank the staff and the board for the updates and revisions of this document, this consumer guide. I agree. I think it's going to be a lot better and a lot clearer. I just had two comments. One, it's a little embarrassing to start out on this way, but I think that you might want to consider adding on page 6, where you're discussing how to find a psychologist, is to add the California Psychological Association website as a place to look. We're a nonprofit, unlike the other two places listed, and we verify that our members are in good standing with the board. And we have a Find a Psychologist locator, so I'd ask that you would consider adding that.
Do you think we should include APA and
Sure.
local psychological associations?
That's a good idea, too, yeah.
Because they've got a locator function in a lot of these sites.
Right.
Can I ask a question about that? Is
Sure.
that appropriate? Would it, for any of the websites, either APA or CPA, would it be that search function be only limited to your members? So it's just your members, only members of CPA would show up in that search function?
Yes.
So I want to make sure, and I guess a question to our council is, by naming organizations that are limiting who is in the search function by nature of membership, put us in a position of the state choosing winners and losers of healthcare providers.
I think that's a good question. The way I see the brochures, these are resources and suggestions. It's not, you can have, if you feel better about it, a disclaimer that says the board does not endorse any particular organizations or just providing resources. And as long as the board keeps open the possibility of other associations or other organizations coming and saying, what about us? so that it's just kind of an umbrella of resources, but I will look into it.
And also, I would point out, right now you're listing Psychology Today and Good Therapy, and both of those are kind of pay to play. I mean, that's also kind of choosing an organization that people don't automatically get listed just because they're a licensed provider. They get listed if they pay to advertise on those websites.
And there are other websites beyond these too,
Of
like
course.
Therapy Tribe, there's a zillion of them. So this almost feels a little bit like we're selecting sites as opposed to, I'd feel more confident, frankly, with the professional associations than I am with some of these other services. But
I think my comment, and I appreciate that comfort level that you have, and I think that if someone was to pull the tapes on this next year and they would go, oh, well, that sounds like an endorsement, that Dr. Phillips has a comfort level with these organizations over others. And I just want to make clear that this board isn't endorsing, not because they aren't amazing organizations, but that we're not endorsing any organization over another. And so to the extent which, if the board accepts Dr. Winkleman's recommendation, as well as Dr. Phillips' recommendation for regional organizations, if we can get clarity from council about what is appropriate and consistent with state rules, I would feel more comforted by that.
I think what you could do, and I'm not, again, I'll need to think through it more, but which would not necessarily require a disclaimer because you're not naming anybody, but just say third-party sites such as state, national and local associations, professional publications, something along, so name kind of the categories, and then you're not endorsing any way or another, and then I don't even know that you would need a disclaimer in those cases.
I agree with that, but this is a guide to consumers. So it'd be nice to have some actual places where people can go, as opposed to saying, so what is it? So they know to look California Psychological Association or Psychology Today? Might as well just tell them to do a web search.
Dr. Phillips, it sounds like you're volunteering to help create a list when we bring this back.
I would.
Winners and losers.
Sure, okay.
Yeah.
Nominated for that. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you for your service.
I think a list may actually be more problematic than just general categories, but we can look into that.
Well, I don't know how we can be if we're going to start going to commercial sites. I don't know how we can be comprehensive because there are innumerable commercial sites. There are also innumerable specialty organizations like people that have been certified for EMDR and those types of things. So we can go, we'd end up with a whole page of websites to potentially search. So maybe a more general descriptor would be better.
What if we said using the Find a Psychologist feature on professional organization or websites or something, but they usually call them Find a Psychologist, whether it's the CPA or the local associations or APA.
Or locator.
Or locate, yeah. It's like, yeah, and maybe we just don't have to say anything more than that.
But you also brought up a good point, Dr. Phillips, with regards, a good suggestion too is to look for a psychologist in the particular area that you want a specialty area as one of the suggestions.
So we could say specialty associations?
And I take Dr. Winkleman's point that we should not be naming organizations, that we should not be choosing folks listed here either. Like I'm not picking on any particular organization. I'm just saying I think the general broader category that I think is emerging as a version of consensus is perhaps the preferred route per Ms. Marks. But I'm always open to having Dr. Phillips work on homework with our council.
Well, I think, and this is for consumers, so we can't be too wordy, and it has to be directions that they can follow without questioning. So when you're talking about specialized associations, specialized you know, if you're a consumer, you have no idea how you would even search. So I don't have the answer, is what I'm saying.
It's puzzling because you do end up with such a generalized description that
It's not helpful.
the average consumer is going to look at it and say,
Yeah, so how are we going to make it helpful unless we delete? You know, I mean, we can delete this third party.
well, we can suggest an area in which they can look and then they can cast about, I suppose. I don't know.
I don't have the answer.
I guess I'm going to find out.
We wait for you to figure it out for us. Thank you, Dr. Winkleman, for being, I know, I'm just thanking her for her first question because it gave us a little bit of robust discussion, but I know you came up for two things. So now I'm curious to see where you're headed.
Well, the second one is not as fun a discussion, I don't think. And I just wanted to know if we could go back to page 12 about psychologists should never violate a patient's confidentiality. And Dr. Harpsheets, I appreciate your mentioning that because I had noticed that too, that sometimes psychologists are either permitted or even mandated to release confidential information, and that may feel like a violation to people, even if they have been told as part of the informed consent process that this would be a situation where some confidential information would need to be released. And of course, we always keep any information released to the minimum needed for that purpose. But I wanted to check what was I didn't catch the language that you had proposed, because I think that the perception of feeling that there's been the confidentiality violated may exist in some patients, even if the therapists were either permitted or even legally mandated, like in a child abuse reporting or elder abuse reporting type situation. So, accepted, okay. Okay, actually, that sounds fine to me. Thank you. I wasn't sitting close enough to see what it actually said. So that's it. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for your comments. Is there any other public comment regarding this agenda item? Please come forward and have a seat. I am seeing no movement. Dr. Phillips, our new worker. Go ahead.
There are exceptions to confidentiality which are typically not explained at the beginning of a relationship. Like, I don't start talking about subpoenas the first visit because I don't know that there's going to be a subpoena involved. So I wonder if we want to say, except under certain conditions which your psychologist can explain to you. There's some that we customarily explain, but we don't know if they're going to have a grand jury subpoena. I mean,
I agree. Or they file a personal injury lawsuit and they're claiming mental distress. There you go. And they're like, wait a minute. So, yeah, I like that better. Can explain.
I hate to take over Dr. Rogers' customary role, but I don't think that's a full sentence.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh.
I was thinking that. And I was keeping my mouth closed. So thank you, Ms. Marks.
Ms. Sirk just suggested that you could put a comma after confidentiality and then continue that sentence. And that does make it a complete sentence, I believe.
Yes.
My question there is whether or not you would then want to use different terminology other than violate the confidentiality as opposed to disclose, speak about and talk about disclosure rather than this is now a violation, because in that case, it would not be considered a violation if those circumstances existed. So it's an issue of disclosure as opposed to a violation.
Mm-hmm.
disclose confidential information except under certain conditions which your psychologist can explain to you. I think it's better.
Mm-hmm.
In the not complete sentences category then, abuse drugs or alcohol is not a complete sentence? It's the next two, it's two below, violate a patient's confidentiality.
Never.
The header is psychologist should never.
So are we concerned about making complete sentences or not?
I mean, well, we already have it. We already have the psychologist should never, and then we finish it.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Are you finished, Dr. Phillips?
Well, I do want to compliment the doctoral program in Vanderbilt on their grammarians.
We have really just, we've gone off the page a little bit, but we're bringing it back. May I make a suggestion for a motion? If anyone would like to hear my suggested motion, that we adopt the edits, but also have board staff take the addition from Dr. Kasuga and Dr. Harpsheets regarding the assessment paragraph.
I'll second it.
No,
Oh.
no. Oh. No.
But did
Nope.
we want to add about Dr. Phillips and
Yes,
the
where?
third-party
Yes.
bit?
Yes,
Yeah.
Dr. Phillips' addition of provider language or provider suggestions. I'm just making a suggested motion. I want someone to take it and
Okay,
run.
I make the motion that we accept
You.
the suggested edits, delegate to staff to work with Dr. Harpsheets and Dr. Kasuga regarding the assessment piece, and with Dr. Phillips regarding the wording of third-party sites.
Second.
Okay. I got
I'm
Cervantes.
sorry to throw a wrench in your grand motion plans. However, does this board want to see the language that Dr. Harpsheets, Dr. Kasuga, and Dr. Phillips develops?
Yes.
So if, to the maker of the motion, Dr. Harpsheets, if, and with the president's permission,
Always.
may I suggest then that you amend your language to say, and return to the board for the two outstanding sections for approval?
So that would be on the February board meeting.
Correct.
So return to look at the changes suggested at the February 2023 board meeting.
Yes.
I second.
Oh,
I
okay.
still have a second.
No, Dr. Cervantes actually second. but
Okay.
run it. But Ms. Purteau, can you please call for the vote
Public comment for the motion.
for the motion? I already
Once
did.
a public comment has to follow every motion,
Why
even
we
though
did.
you've called public comment before.
I will call public comment again. Please, if you have public comment regarding this wonderful document we've been discussing, can you please come forward and have a seat? No motion in the gallery. Ms. Purteau, can you please call for the vote?
Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harbsheets.
Aye.
Nystrom.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Riscate.
Aye.
Rogers.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes. And we're going to take about a 10-minute break, so we will reconvene at 2:55. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to resume the Board of Psychology meeting. Ms. Purteau, can you please call the roll?
Here. Cervantes.
Here.
Fu.
Here.
Harbsheets.
Here.
Nystrom.
Here.
Phillips.
Here.
Riscate.
Here.
Rogers.
Here.
Tate.
Here.
Roll is complete.
Thank you so much. Quorum is established. We're going to jump right back into agenda item number 20H. This is the review and propose edits to draft survey questions to assess barriers to telehealth. Ms. Sorick, please.
So included in the meeting materials are a draft consumer survey and provider survey that the Outreach and Communications Committee reviewed in September. And these drafts are provided to the board for review, edit, and consideration. Once the edits are provided or the language is approved, I will work with the Solid unit to incorporate this survey into SurveyMonkey, and we will get the surveys out to the relevant targeted stakeholder groups.
Are there any board comment or questions regarding this agenda item?
I have a question on question 2, where it said, are you confident in receiving psychological services? I wondered, since you're sending these to consumers, are you comfortable in receiving, might be more understandable?
I agree.
And then on question 4, the technical barriers, I think one of the concerns that has been expressed is that some people just don't have access at all. So under A, where it says broadband access, would there be a better way to say that, like internet access or problems, e.g. speed or something like that? Because I think we want to know, are there people out there that just don't have internet? I think that's
We put other down there as well so that they could
so we would
write
want
it,
them-
you know, put something that we did not include.
Okay, so they would specify where it says other, you might put specify next to it or something?
Yes, I think that was our intention, yes.
Okay. I think I have
Would
more.
internet access be a more plain language term?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I also, just from a grammatical point of view, don't we want to do something with that EG, so it's like, it's
Oh,
barking
yeah,
at me.
period, comma.
So maybe E period, G period, comma?
Any other comments? Are you reading through it real quick?
Okay.
I was thinking of the entire document since it's so few questions.
So, yes, I have, did I just jump in? I'm so sorry, Ms.
No.
Nystrom.
That's okay. I just had a question regarding the surveys. Once the information is collected, how will we be, will it be open to the public, or how will we be, discerning the information?
What we discussed was gathering the information and then deciding at that point, depending on what the information or data says, who we would want to share that data with. We can immediately, once the board reviews the information, we can post it on our website and send it out to social media, et cetera. But there may be, I think when we originally talked about this, we had talked about this being a springboard to a possible white paper that an agency or organization may want to take on based on the data that we collect. So this is not kind of the end-all be-all, but this is kind of step one to something that we hope springs forward to something else.
So one of my comments is for question 6. I wonder if we can just say, are there other barriers to telehealth? Mainly because we talk 4 and 5 are technical and financial, and then 6, you're looking at other barriers which you enumerate already, and I'm not sure if systemic and psychosocial is necessarily consumer friendly or accessible. Well, I'm not sure if the language there would trigger what it means. So that's one comment. And then the second comment is there's like capitalization in the middle of sentences. And so if we can just do a check with folks about the
Grammatical edits.
or the logic behind that, that would be really helpful.
So for number 6, would you just like it more general? Is that what you're
Yeah.
thinking?
Are there other barriers to telehealth? And I think telehealth would not be capitalized in this case, such as language barriers, socioeconomic factors, lack of diverse providers, et cetera. And then yes, no, and then number 7 onward.
Okay. I think we actually had that initially, and then we went back and put in examples to try and make it, but.
I think the examples are helpful. Absolutely, yeah. I think just saying other rather than systemic or psychosocial.
Okay.
I like the examples as well, but I also wanted to add as an example would be physical barriers, like, disability, like physical disability.
I think we had that on there, actually.
Or limitations, physical limitations.
I have a general comment. I just wonder if this language could be made more consumer-friendly throughout. You know, it's very highlighted the need for the Board of Psychology to, why can't we just say the Board of Psychology is thinking about or is considering and just kind of like dumbing it down a little bit? Not dumbing it down, but
simpler
making it more
language.
consumer-friendly. And we've got like telehealth for purposes of the survey is, why don't we just say telehealth is providing psychological services by the internet or by phone?
Are you referring to the entire document or that first paragraph?
The first paragraph, but I think the whole document should be kind of thought of that way, I think, just so that a consumer reads it and doesn't go, what the hell are they talking about? I'm 8 questions, I don't care, I'm closing this tab. So I think if it was a little bit more.
Do you have some suggestions in that first paragraph of, a little verbiage for us?
Consider how for the Board of Psychology to examine how it conducts business and how it impacts access to psychological services.
Too much?
But I think that first sentence is too much.
Okay.
Out of this landscape? I think for people that are erudite, that's a great introduction to a sentence, but I don't think that's the way to start it.
Are you thinking that maybe going to the last sentence is a good way to introduce the item?
Huh?
Just going to the very last sentence in that paragraph, does that?
That's definitely problematic. A word we don't need to use in the survey. I think we just say telehealth is providing psychological services by the internet or by phone.
Okay.
I don't think they need, I know we're trying to conduct a survey in a professional way, but I think we also want to consider our audience and make this as accessible as possible, because these are folks that maybe don't have regular access to the internet, and they may have a burner phone because they can't afford to have a, so
Right.
I want to kind of be able to access those folks and have them read a survey that makes them feel comfortable rather than kind of puts them off. I don't mean to be overly critical of the committee.
Oh, no.
I just think we need to think about our audience a little bit more. That's all I have to say.
No, I appreciate the feedback. I think we've looked at it so many times and reworked it a few times, so, the more information is helpful.
Sorry. I heard yesterday during our DCA update that Secretary Castro Ramirez has convened actually an equity working group. So I'm curious if there's a way to not necessarily merge, but make sure that we're working in alignment with each other. And so I wonder if telehealth is being discussed at that equity group such that they may have a broader reach and resources for such surveys?
Actually, when we had our board check-ins with the secretary, she asked what we were doing, and I said this survey. So I want to make sure that that maybe we can link up with agency and leverage that partnership to get maybe the surveys out to additional stakeholders. So thank you for the reminder on that. I'm wondering on kind of making the introductory paragraph, because we wanted to kind of give a why do we care and why are we collecting this data? Right. But in a way that is user-friendly, that we're not going to lose the people and they're going to complete the survey. Because I know my proclivity to completing surveys is not always one either. I mean, it's very few questions. And then I always ask, how long is this going to take me? Or how many questions do you have before I complete it? And I know the importance of surveys, so this is coming from a survey person. So are there any suggestions on ways that we can get to the point of why we're doing this and simplify it in a way that's more user-friendly. I agree, out of this landscape, that can definitely be limited.
I think I have a suggestion. So I have to write it out. I have, after the challenges of 2020, I might change that. I just added that in, so let me strike that. I started off with, the Board of Psychology is in the process of examining the factors that impact psychological services offered via telehealth. The following survey is aimed at understanding the barriers to telehealth for consumers. And then maybe just putting something about this coming out of the challenges of 2020.
Turn it off, turn it on. I do think it's useful to have some kind of definition of telehealth, but I think you want to really keep it simple. Because telehealth's another one of those words where we know what it is as healthcare providers. Some of our clients know what it is, but a lot of people, my clients talk about, do we have an appointment over Zoom? And I don't even use Zoom, but I mean, that's kind of, yeah.
Can you, Dr. Rogers, can you repeat those two sentences just so?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Okay. 'Cause Mr. Burke is over there, so.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Burke. Okay. The Board of Psychology is in the process of examining the factors that impact psychological services offered via telehealth. And Dr. Phillips, do you suggest that maybe after that sentence, we put the definition of what telehealth is?
You have it at the end, right?
Yes.
Sorry.
Telehealth is providing psychological services by internet or telephone.
With the exception of the sentence that starts with the following survey. Yes. So keeping that sentence. And then moving the last sentence that shows the definition of telehealth, making that the second sentence.
How does that read for you, Dr. Phillips?
I think I could say the following survey is to help understand the barriers to telehealth.
Oh, simpler language than the initial. Can you say that sentence?
Period.
Dr. Phillips, can you say that sentence again out loud so we can all hear it?
The following survey is, I would say not help understand, but just is to understand the barriers to telehealth for consumers.
Okay. Does the first sentence sound okay to you?
Yep.
Ms. Sorek, I have a question. Did you want to include the context under which this all came to be? Did you want to put that?
I don't want to lose that because that's kind of how this all started. And I don't know how we can reword that. But I think as we were discussing, you know, we wanted to do something tangible to collect some data so that we were providing some information that was helpful and useful.
And in reaction to what was going on at the time.
Exactly. And maybe eliminating is in the process of examining.
What do you think of that, Dr. Rogers?
Oh, what about following the pandemic and nationwide protests in 2020? The Board of Psychology began to examine?
Mm-hmm.
And comma after 2020.
Do we want to be specific about what the protests were about? Because we had previously talked
yes.
about, I think we had previously read about racial inequities. And so I wonder if we can continue naming that.
Could we say racial inequality as opposed to racial inequity? In other words, that's another like upper division college word.
Well, we had a racial reckoning.
Or we could just say racism.
It was a nationwide racial reckoning. That's been used in the media. Oh, I'm sorry.
Turn on your microphone.
She's musing right
now. In the media, the phrase has been racial reckoning, a nationwide racial reckoning.
The delete protests
2020.
and replace with racial reckoning. Reckoning, sorry.
I like the context. I'm concerned that there is a connection that we are making here between the pandemic and telehealth that other people aren't. So I might suggest something like where it says impacts, examine the factors that impact psychological services offered via telehealth in order to expand access to those services. Because I think that's the issue, is the expansion of access.
Or you could just say that impact the availability of psychological services.
Does everyone like how that reads initially?
I would suggest the substitution of the word by for via. Again, kind of just more plain English.
Yep, keeping it simple, absolutely.
And for me, rereading reckoning, I think I prefer inequities, or also to go back, protest, or even see what maybe some of the other language that has been used by DCA, so it's consistent.
Oh, okay. So a different term than reckoning. Okay.
While people are mulling that over, I have two things that I wanted to raise. That's possible. So one is on number 2, are you confident in receiving psychological services? I was thinking if we should, are you comfortable? I'm thinking, are you comfortable and willing to receive psychological services via telehealth? Because they may be comfortable but not willing, or it doesn't matter. You just care about more of the yes or no and comfortable. That's number 1. And it's just kind of like more questions, because like I'm not part of the initial process of creating this one. And the second one is there's a focus on the barriers, and I understand that. But I'm thinking about overall concerns about from the consumer and about using telehealth. And I understand that this is like, focus on barriers, but I'm wondering if we can have an item about, do they have like, concerns?
I think we were talking in the committee meeting about keeping it as short as possible, so really keeping it no more than 8
Got it.
questions total, and then, 6 actual responses, but you could add to 8 if you needed to write more, keeping it short and sweet.
Because I don't understand why, have you experienced any barriers in accessing telehealth? And if they say yes, what type of answers on number 7 were you expecting? Like, yes, because I have, oh wait, okay, so it's number 6. Oh, okay, so I got a little bit confused. So have you experienced any barriers in accessing telehealth? Yes, go to question number, if no, go to question number 6. Okay, so if they don't have barriers, they go to question number 6.
Oh, you know what? It's because we added two questions. That's why the numbers don't match up.
Okay, sorry.
So it should be no. If no, go to question 8. Are there any additional barriers?
So they
That
already
was-
said they don't have barriers. And if yes, explain why? Like, because they have internet?
Actually, it should just not have a go to whatever. It should just be yes, go to question 4, no, you're done.
I thought, could we scroll down just a little bit, please? I thought for question number 7, if you answered yes to number 6, this was your opportunity to elaborate on what the specific barriers were.
Got it.
Sounds like.
So for some person, it might be lack of diverse providers. For another person, it might be language barriers. And so this is their opportunity to just say what that is to give us more information.
Got it. So that's not clear because of the direction from number 3, but we can make
So
changes.
if it's yes, then they should go to question number 7 and not 6. Or not 4.
I think,
Have you ever experienced? Oh, yeah, that's right. Yes, that's right.
If I may, I think, and Dr. Kusuga, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what I'm hearing from you is if you answer no for question number 3, it should say, go to question 8, and then the question 8 should be rewarded to say, do you have concerns which have not been identified in the survey related to telehealth that you would like us to know or that you would like to share?
that would be good.
That sounds a little more English.
Yeah.
Is that better? Is that capturing what you wanted, Dr. Kusuga?
Yeah, yeah.
So-
it doesn't make it longer than 8, but then we're making it more concise and allowing room for other people's concerns about telehealth.
So I'll repeat it again for Mr. Burke, which is, are there additional concerns related to telehealth which you wish to share with?
Now, can I ask a question? I just keep thinking of the word barriers, and when I was reading this before, and would it be simpler to add, instead of barriers, say problems? It seems just sort of simple, direct, just the language. What problems have you had? I don't know. Does that seem too simplistic? It just seemed easier to me because I wasn't sure. Like sometimes when people think of barriers, they think of stanchions or, like you're driving a car and there's a barrier, an obstacle.
Yeah.
And while we think of that word as, I don't know, I just thought problem seemed like a simpler, more direct word, but maybe you guys had that conversation already?
I don't think, you're looking at me. I think we've used barrier the whole time. I think that was the word that we have attached to, but you bring up a good point because we have been talking about how to make it simpler for a consumer to process, but Mr. Fu?
Oh, I think we do enumerate, though. We're not asking a person to identify what a barrier is so that the person would think of a physical barrier, which you've described. I think in 4 and 5 and 6, the options listed clearly define what barriers we wish them to consider as, quote, a barrier. So I think we're asking a person to say what are the technical barriers, and then we provide 4 technical barriers. And same with 5 and 6. But that's just my interpretation. I obviously, folks may feel differently about that.
So, Mr. Burke, on number 3, we just want to change the number we're referring people to question 8. I don't know if you've done that.
Yes.
Oh, you did. Okay, perfect. Going back to the first paragraph and just wanted to make sure we're using the same verbiage. And I think the verbiage that the agency has been using has been equity. So I think inequity seems to be consistent with the terminology that has been used around the agency. So while I hear you, it's maybe not as plain language. It is consistent with the terminology the agency's using. I don't know.
It's fine. I still think the survey reads like something that you're expecting a certain level of education to have done the survey, and who we're trying to target is the people that are having barriers to service. It's sometimes made language barriers or educational barriers or income barriers or. So I think it feels very like a very formal document. I am a client of psychological services. Who the hell talks like that? We do, but they don't.
I think that's what triggered my thought about the word problem versus barrier. Because we really have to think, but again, if they don't have access, would they ever get this survey?
And are we providing this survey in a variety of languages?
This survey is going to be, well, and there's another thing, is this survey is going to be electronic. It's a Survey Monkey. So they will have to have
Internet access. They're really out of
access
luck.
to,
Right.
it won't be done by phone. We don't have the funding for that. It won't be done by mail. We don't have the funding for that either. So unfortunately, we're limited to, unless the agency would like to provide that, if they have an extra pot of gold somewhere, to do the other formats.
Mail.
Or if there's folks in the audience that would like to offer to provide it in additional formats, that's always welcome.
While there's a pause, I'm going to just suggest one addition to number 5, the financial barriers. These are all related to the services themselves, but you might include something like data usage, because people sometimes have to pay extra for data usage, or costs of the equipment or something along, the costs are associated with the technology.
I was going to suggest that perhaps we can continue, I hate to, we've been on this for a while, but if we could continue this discussion at the next board meeting, I can put it on the February meeting agenda.
Okay, that sounds good, because it sounds like we have some verbiage to work out. Okay.
Ms. Dorick, on that note, I wonder if, depending on the volume of the agenda, if it's appropriate to ask DCA to provide an update with regard to their equity work. so that we tie these two together, so that in light of also Ms. Nystrom's comment about the language that is being used and how that's consistent with departmental efforts or agency efforts.
I love that idea, just so we're on the same page, and maybe they can support our our efforts from our, Any other comments? So this agenda item is going to be rolled to February, but I would like to take public comment, right? Forgot this. So I'm going to open up public comment for this item, knowing that this will appear again on the agenda in February 2023. But if you have public comment on this item, please come forward and have a seat, please. I do not see any movement, so thank you, and we will see this again. We're going to take some of these items out of order. I do have my eye on the clock, and I'm trying to be mindful. So we are going to take item number 21, the licensing timeframes update, short-term and long-term solutions to the application backlogs, and Ms. Chung is on her way. Thank you.
Thank you, Board President. At the August 20, 2022 board meeting, the board was provided a snapshot of the current timeframes and the short-term and long-term plan to address the lengthened times observed in the beginning of the year. This item is to provide an update about the status of those short-term, temporary, and long-term permanent solutions. So to start off, the short-term temporary solutions, we have acquired the temporary help to assist with the review and processing of licensing and registration applications. So the status of the additional personnel as follows. We have the retired annuitant on board since April 2022. Additional retired annuitant was onboarded in mid-October. And then our special projects coordinator was onboarded since May this year. Regarding long-term permanent solutions, they include legislative and regulatory efforts. So we also sought additional resources through budget change proposal and redirecting personnel within the board. And also, we continue to evaluate our business process and to make any improvements along the way. And these evaluations also drive any enhancement changes of our brief systems. So listed on the memo are the long-term solutions. The first one is the pathways to licensure related to statutory changes. So these are completed already. The second is about the regulatory changes from the pathways package, and they are next up for drafting. Regarding budget change proposal, we are prepared to submit a proposal in spring in the 2023 year. Regarding the redirecting office technician position to the licensing unit, this has been completed and the person is onboarded in late October. We continue to review and prepare for a Paperlite transition. We are scheduled to work with the OIO Office of Organization of Improvement Office to review our Paperlite transition process, and we schedule to have this review in Q1 of next year. Regarding brief changes, which include making the complete application online, as I have reported yesterday, and we also previously mentioned that we have transitioned some of the board correspondence to be sent out by the system automatically by some triggering events, such as a withdrawal letter if an application is to be withdrawn. So those are currently sent out by the system right now. And this is an ongoing effort of our unit. So by putting in place these long-term and short-term solutions, we aim for positive impacts through shortening the processing timeframes as compared to the beginning of the year. The timeframes are updated approximately every 2 weeks. And you can see an example for the October 27 update in the attachment, which is a hand carry item. In the attachment, in the hand carry, there's another attachment. You'll find bar charts of the average processing timeframes for the past 7 months from April to October, which show that the timeframes are improving. So we are very hopeful to maintain these improved timeframes as we continue to implement the identified short-term and long-term solutions. And happy to answer any questions if you have any for me. Thank you.
Thank you for your report, Ms. Chung. Before I open it up for board comment, thank you for being so diligent and steadfast this past year. I know your department values your leadership, and thank you for working so hard to provide everyone with the short-term and long-term solutions. So I'm opening it up for board comment. Questions for Ms. Chung?
Thank you.
Dr. Harpsheets?
Could you tell us a little bit about how the Paperlite solution will help improve processing?
Thank you for the question. So regarding Paperlite, so currently our board processes and application process are really paper heavy. So everything, we rely a lot on paper coming in and then returning them or like going back and forth. So by going Paperlite, we are gonna have electronic records of our application materials. So it will be allow for a quicker retrieval, and then we have information already accepted in the system. So for us to review, or if we receive any questions from applicants, we're able to quickly go to the system and see what we have there. So that was the goal, the end goal, the long-term goal for us as we're going through this transition.
Oh, and it sounds like it will be more accurate. We won't be worried at all about people saying, oh, well, you lost my document, or you can't find my document. It sounds like that will be a benefit too?
Yes, that would be too, because we will be scanning and uploading these incoming application materials to our BRIS system, so we have an electronic record of them.
Okay. I wanted to echo Dr. Tate too. Thank you so much. I have appreciated working with you and your group, and as I was saying yesterday, I think the whole board staff has contributed to this effort and really impressive results, and thank you for you and your staff and dedication.
Thank you, Dr. Harpsheets.
Any other board comment for Ms. Chung? Great, then I'd like to open up for public comment. If you have public comment, please come up and take a seat. Welcome back, Dr. Winkleman.
Hi, Elizabeth Winkleman, again from the California Psychological Association. I first just wanted to thank the board for their attention to this important matter, and thank you very much to Ms. Chung and the staff, board staff, for making these really impressive and very helpful improvements. We really appreciate it, and having the long-term and short-term plans for solutions. One other item that I wanted to mention is, as we discussed at the last meeting in August, in which CPA shared our data from our survey of over 400 members about it was primarily about the response times in terms of processing for licensure, but we also asked about general response times to phone calls and emails to the board. And I would ask that you would also consider addressing that if you have the information in the August meeting. But the results show that there are a lot of difficulties still in those areas. For example, with email inquiries, within the past 12 months, 29% had a response in 1 to 2 weeks, 17% more in addition, 3 to 4 weeks, but 34% never received a response to their email to the board. And then for phone calls, we found that 16% got them returned within 1 to 2 weeks, 10% additional 10% in 2 to 4 weeks, and 47% never received a response. So I would ask the board to, in addition to continuing with this excellent work in improving the licensing process timeframes, to also consider about the responsiveness to the general emails and phone calls to the board. From what I observe in my role within CPA, often people are really wanting to know issues about how to make sure that they're complying with all the rules and the regulations, and it's important for them to, be able to get a response. They really want to be doing the right thing, and be practicing properly in accordance with all of the rules and laws and regulations. So thank you for taking that under consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Winkleman.
I'm going to invite Mr. Glassbeagle up just in case I missed something from Ms. Chung and Mr. Glassbeagle. But one of the challenges that we've had with some of the phone call and email inquiries is a way to track some of those data points. We did share the survey with our staff, and we did discuss responsiveness with our staff. As far as a report out, there's not a real effective or impactful way to share with you where we are progress-wise. As far as these short-term and long-term goals, we have a data point to reference with application processing times, so we can see and track the days in which processing is going up or down. With emails and phone calls, there's just, like I said, a challenge with gathering the data to be able to speak to progress. Am I missing anything, Ms. Chung and Mr. Glassbeagle? But again, we have shared the survey information and discussed with relevant staff that's responsible for those items, so that those are improvement areas that staff has been made aware of, and we can follow up with individual staff on those items. Is there anything I didn't cover? Okay.
Ms. Sora, can I ask you a question? Frequently on listservs, and Dr. Winkleman mentioned that sometimes licensees want to call the board and ask about some interpretation of a regulation to make sure they're in compliance. And could you speak to what is the board's role on providing that kind of information?
I'm sorry, Dr. Harper-Sheets. I had something in my throat and so was coughing. So the question is about questions from licensees about abiding by?
Yes, Dr. Winkleman mentioned that in the survey, apparently, respondees were saying that they're trying to call the board, they're trying to ensure, because they're trying to ensure that they're in compliance with various regulations. And I see that many times on listservs that people will say, oh, we should call your board and ask. And I just wondered, are we prepared to provide that kind of information? Is that a role that our board has? I've just never been really clear on that.
I think the board has a role in responding to licensees with respect to what the statutes say, what the regulations say, where to find those, what relevant statutes or regulations may apply to their question. The board cannot and should not provide legal advice to licensees to say, yes, what you're describing is within the confines of the law. What a person describes is not always the full context, all the facts, and we would not want the board to get into a situation where a complaint is made, the person said, well, I called the board and they said I was fine, but we didn't have complete information. And I understand how frustrating it may be for a licensee whose only desire is to comply with the law, and the board cannot provide legal advice, but they certainly can, and I believe do try to point licensees in the right direction. This is a statute that addresses this. This is a regulation that addresses that. there are times in which the question is very simple and clear, and the board, I believe, staff has actually answered those questions. That's fine, that's, the law allows you to do X. I don't know what the survey results that Dr. Winkleman refers to, apply to, but what those circumstances were. But I do believe the board has a role, and it has to be cautious.
I asked a question because I just wanted to be clear so that licensees aren't saying, well, the board is really letting us down because they're not doing this, this, and this. So I just wanted to get some clarity on that. Maybe Dr. Winkleman can help us understand what she's hearing on her end.
Yeah, our question, the survey question was just if there was any attempt to contact the board by phone or email. I tend to hear, when I know that there are questions that I tend to hear that they're asking about things that have to do with laws or regulations, often I think in the nature that Ms. Marks is saying could be answered, like, is there a limit to the number of delegated supervisors or something? And I do think that in the coming year, a year or two, there are going to be questions about compliance with the new CPD regulations, and I do think that the licensees should be able to ask a question if their activity is in a gray area, since it's the board that's going to be, the CPD staff that's going to be deciding whether they comply or not. So yes, I'm not talking about complex legal, my patient did this and that. But the survey itself did not break down what the contact was. It was any contact, any attempt to contact the board by phone or by email, and we separated those out. And you have the data in your August meeting materials.
Thank you, Dr. Winkleman. I think those were questions for you, right? Those complex ones, they come to you.
Listen, I would love to be able to answer them, but some things it's in the board's hands, and I obviously cannot answer them. And so when I can't, and it's something that that I do believe that it's a board that it's in the board's discretion, then I would suggest people call the board. But all these people who respond, these are 400 people, it wasn't that they called me first and I asked them to call the board. It was anyone who responded to the survey who had tried to contact the board for any reason. So it's just more my speculation from my experience as what people, I think, often might call the board for. But they didn't go through me. It's just any attempt to contact the board by phone or email.
I was just going to say that I think, that there is a resource problem, particularly with how short-staffed the licensing department has been relative to trying to keep current and to answer all the questions. But I think that if a licensee tries to make contact with someone with the board, they do deserve the courtesy of some response, even if the response is that constitutes legal advice and we can't respond to that particular question. And I think the staff of the Board of Psychology is very consumer-oriented and really wants to please licensees, but I think they've been operating under particularly harsh circumstances recently. But I do think that also that the people that contact them should be assured that they're going to get some kind of response. And I know anecdotally, the complaint I get the most from licensees that I know is I called the board and I didn't get a return telephone call, or it took 6 weeks for somebody to get back to me. And that's something I think we want to correct as an institution.
Just following Dr. Phillips' point, I think it would be helpful for me to understand some of the processes that go in place. Mr. Glass-Steagall, and I understand that the survey asked for any touch point, but I'm assuming most of it's probably going to BOP mail and our general line. So when it comes to the BOP mail, is that mailbox checked daily?
Yes. I am, after the departure of our longtime office technician, Miss Diana Brown. I have taken over handling until the position is filled. It's been over 2 months that she had it first, and I've been single-handedly checking it all day.
Right. And just to be clear, I think the survey results preceded you taking over the role. And my questions isn't to suggest that you aren't responding to any emails whatsoever. It's just to get a better understanding of processes internally. When it comes to voicemails, checking voicemails, how are voicemail messages being taken in and logged as being received? And then is there a process in place where we take down the number that has been left on the voicemail and then a checkbox that says return phone call, yes or no? I'm curious what processes are in place to go through the mailbox.
The way our phone tree and Microsoft Teams is set up is that any calls that come in are first sent to a tree where they can choose to have their calls sent to a different spot. So either licensing unit, enforcement unit, verifications and file transfers, continuing education, and then a general mailbox. I think that's all of them. And there's an option to go straight to the Breeze Help Desk, which is through the Consumer Information Center. So any calls that come into those lines are sent to I can speak to the central services ones. I believe I know where the licensing calls go, but I'll leave that for Ms. Chung. But the general ones go to the BOP email box. The verification file transfers go to that general box. The CE questions go to the CE general box, which all have staff that are responsible for maintaining and working through those emails. So we don't track them on a spreadsheet, but it's all done via Outlook.
Understood. So, sorry, voicemails are coming in with a message being left in Outlook is what I'm hearing. Okay, great.
Yes.
I think, Ms. Sorek, one of the really neat things that you and Ms. Chung did was that staff town hall that brought together folks to understand what were some of the sticky points and what were the potential solutions. And as a person who has very limited insight, except for this illuminating conversation that we just had, I'm curious at some point if that town hall would say, maybe it's helpful for each voicemail that we do receive, we're able to track that we return that voicemail or directed or responded in some way so that when there is a survey from an outside party, we're able to say, well, actually, we've been keeping records and we're able to demonstrate that of these voicemails, we're able to return X percentage. I understand that's more time to track. So I'm not suggesting that's the way to do it, but I would be curious how staff would seek solutions just in the same vein that you have successfully done with it comes to the 100% reduction in time, I think, or 50% reduction in time that we saw in licensing.
I'm wondering, because we have a starting point with your first survey, if CPA would be open or willing to 12 months in do an updated survey, which would give us, we have the baseline now, which was your first survey. It would give us a better idea of how we're performing and if there has been improvements. My internal hope is we're going to say, wow, that's great. We're not seeing some of the same issues come up again. I'm wondering if you guys would be open or willing to do that. And I say 12 months because I know some of the short-term, long-term solutions are going to take us a little front-end work to do some training, and we've got some process improvements that we're working on. So I want to make sure it's an impactful enough time so we see enough of a change internally. And I'm looking to Ms. Chung to see if you agree with the 12 months.
Yeah, yes, we would be very glad to do that. And I really appreciate that you'll be looking into this and willing to have us just survey our members again and get another data point. And I do appreciate the hard work of staff, and I know what it is to be short-staffed. And I'm just really glad to, here, that people are aware. And I also appreciate the idea, I think it was Dr. Phillips said that if there's no answer that can be provided, just letting people know, that's also fine. We're not expecting, I understand also that the board can't always give exactly the information that's requested. So anyway, short answer is yes, we'd be very glad to do the survey, and a bit longer is just I really, really appreciate the board and the staff and taking the time to really consider this and think about how to improve it. So thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Winkleman. Is there any other public comment for this agenda item? I do not see any movement. Thank you, Mr. Glass-Steagall. Thank you, Ms. Chung. We'll be moving on to agenda item number 22, Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, EPPP 2 update. Dr. Kasuga.
Thank you, Dr. Tate. We have the ASPBB recently announced that the EPPP will only be offered as a two-part examination effective January 1, 2026. And in the materials, we provided 2 attachments, the EPPP announcement from October 2022 and the EPPP factual overview of that decision. And you can review that, but we also have Dr. Horn from ASPBB, who can probably answer some of the questions you may have with those attachments. So if you want to sit in front, so you can answer some of the questions that the board may have with regards those attachments. So just wanted to give a little bit of information about the board's response given this new information. So we are going to have a meeting, the EPPP Ad Hoc Committee, which is comprised of Mr. Fu, Dr. Harb Sheets, and myself. This meeting will take place in April of 2023. And once we have the exact dates, I think it will be announced pretty soon. So we will have the dates and the agenda for the meeting announced. Primarily, it's going to be in relation to the 2018 recommendation from the board, from the whole board with regards adapting the changes and making, and we will be getting that rolling, the adoption of any possible recommendations with regards regulations, and we're hoping to bring those recommendations back to the full board for our May board meeting. So with that said, I'll give the board members a chance to ask any questions with regards to the attachments.
Thanks, Dr. Kasuga. Hello, Dr. Horn. Welcome. Any board members have questions? Or Dr. Horn, do you have a statement or an intro, or would you just like to entertain questions?
I'm happy to entertain questions. I mean, you've got all the information here. I'm happy to elaborate on anything if you have a particular question about it. So.
Okay. Any board members have questions or comments for Dr. Horn? This is the time. Nope. Go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Horn.
Hi there.
So the comment I would just make is one of the things that we did share on several occasions was enough lead time to implement this, and I just want to acknowledge the timeline that has been provided to us does, I think, provide that opportunity for a conversation around lead time should the board adopt both parts in our conversations. And so that timeline, I think, I do feel heard as a board when it comes to this issue, and just would like to acknowledge that. And then secondly, I understand that one of the big discussions when Dr. Kasuga was chairing the large 18-person working group, was around the cost of the EPPP Part 2 exam. And I think, if I understand correctly, that the proposed fee has been reduced by 25%, and that and that ASPPB does not intend at this point changing that fee reduction. Would you be able to shed light on what are the potential criteria by which ASPPB may evaluate with regard to the pricing of that Part 2 piece that would affect that 25% reduction in price?
Sure, I can just tell you what the process that ASPPB has gone through anytime it ever increases a fee, which is giving our member boards 2 years' notice before any fee is increased. And at this point in time, there's absolutely no thinking, that it will be increased. The fee is $450 for the Part 2. Again, if things were to change, and that might be the cost of creating the exam increases or whatever, those kinds of things. Again, our member jurisdictions get 2 years notice before any fee is increased. So,
Thanks, Dr. Horn. Really appreciate that.
Oh, can I ask a question? Dr. Horn, can you share with us any thoughts or discussions at ASPPB about grandfathering people in to people who are previously licensed, who have not taken 2 parts, and just that whole question?
So this is ASPPB's recommendation that the EPPP, whatever was in existence in that person's jurisdiction at the time they were licensed, that was the EPPP. I think it's probably a good idea to look at this like an update of the WAIS or the WISC or something like that. You know, as of some point in time, this is the new WISC or WAIS. It doesn't change the fact that people took it earlier and they got their score based on an earlier form. They still got the score they got. This is, we're looking at this exactly the same way. This is a revision of the exam, an update of the exam, and nobody who's already licensed, should have to go back and take it. It wasn't in existence.
Yes, I'm thinking about some of our people who become licensed in this state, say in 2025, and then choose to move to another state. I'm thinking about how would their license be problematic? I guess if they move to a state, if they move to a state that's already adopted it, it could be.
It could be.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And there are states that have already adopted it,
Right.
and some are ready to adopt it now. They're not going to be waiting till January of 2026.
Yeah.
But that is completely up to the jurisdiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.
Sorry, Dr. Horn. I'm keeping in mind Dr. Winkleman's comment earlier about being responsive to emails. And one of the emails that we did receive, and I did reply to, I should mention, was a letter that we did receive from 3 programs at UC Berkeley, UCLA, and the University of Southern California. The letter is lengthy, and I won't go into it, but I think one of the issues that I just want to raise and would love your response to is the 3 programs wrote indicating that the EPPP Part 2 would not, quote, contribute meaningfully to enhancing protection of the public. And they cite a couple reasons for it. And I know we'll discuss further in April, but I would love your response to that, or some of the thoughts that ASPPB have been discussing with regard to the role of Part 2 and how it may or may not enhance consumer protection.
So this is going to be kind of a long answer. First of all, let me say an update on the EPPP, the factual overview, that pretty much was written to respond to those letters you got. That's a letter that was sent to a lot of licensing boards from the training community. So you have this in your supplemental agenda materials, we've pretty much gone point by point to answer that, to answer those concerns. But I'm going to think of a way to say this. Currently, the EPPP is, for us, for California, is a knowledge exam. Knowledge is part of competence, but it's not all of competence. I mean, skills are another part of competence. And with this, with the part 2 added, we're able to assess both knowledge and the skills that are required at the point of licensure. All the other ways we have of measuring competence at this point, or all the other ways that are being used, have problems with them. So for example, I've used this before, and y'all probably have heard it, reliance on supervisors' ratings. There's an article that was written a while ago in the American Psychologist called "Where Are the Other 90%?" And it's because supervisors rank the people, their supervisees, in the top 10% and move them on to the next level. And we've been hearing, especially since COVID, but even before that, from internships, that people aren't prepared. They're coming in less competent, so they don't have the competencies they expect them to have at the beginning of internships. So something is wrong somewhere. Something is slipping up somewhere. So what this does, and I think this has been one thing that psychologists, because we're trained in testing, and I'm kind of looking to the psychologists in this group, we're trained in testing, and we know about validity, and we know about reliability, and we think, well, I know that, so therefore these things need to be done. But when you are validating a measure for licensure, it's a different kind of a process. We want to know, just like you want to know with a driver's license, we want to know that person at that point in time can drive safely. And that's what we want to know of people we license, not whether they're going to ever get in trouble, not whether as a driver they're going to ever have an accident. We want to know, at this point, do they demonstrate the knowledge and the skills necessary to practice safely and practice independently. That's what we're licensing them to do. So this provides a standardized way of doing that. So, and it provides a defensible way of assessing that. And it's not dependent on I'll say non-standard evaluations. So does that answer your question?
It does. That's really helpful, and I look forward to further discussions in April.
I'll be here.
I have one more question, sorry.
Sure.
So, hi, Dr. Horn. In our handouts, at the top of page 5, there's a statement. I'll just read it.
Is this in the supplemental?
Yeah, it
handout?
is.
Okay.
It is. And it's, I guess in what we have, it's in ours, page 8 out of 10 pages, but it's page 5 on the document. And I'm just wondering how, I'll read it, and you can maybe explain to me what the thinking was behind it. It says ASPPB also expects that administering the EPPP Part 1 at the point of knowledge acquisition will result in significant cost savings for students who would otherwise pay for expensive third-party test preparation materials. So I'm just wondering if, I understand that they're saying, well, if you do it right at the end of your knowledge acquisition, you should be prepared to, without having to purchase these other materials. And what was the, I'm not sure I totally agree, but maybe you could supplement my understanding.
So right now, requiring or allowing the EPPP to be taken only after graduation makes it at least a year past the coursework. For some folks, depending on if they finish their dissertation or not. It may be longer than a year. They may not even take it in their postdoc year. It might be even after their postdoc, depending. So we know, we have statistics on this. The closer someone takes the knowledge to the time they actually acquire the knowledge, the better they do. So what in the research that we've done, what we know is that when people study, they do better on the exam. They have, they pass, or more likely to pass. And so some people feel that taking those courses, well, again, they're pretty far at this point in time from the point of acquisition. So you forget that knowledge, right? You get more specialized as you leave school. You focus on the populations you work with, and you get more specialized, so some of that broader knowledge you don't have. There may still be people who think, I need to take those courses that'll help me feel calmer. It'll make me feel very prepared. I don't know if what psychologists here did. My primary supervisor in my postdoc told me, just get a Psych 1 textbook and study it and you'll pass. I didn't do that, because it was like, the main thing is to study. People have to study. But I think there will probably still be people taking those courses. I think what ASPPB's concern is that we've inadvertently, because of where this is placed, contributed to these private companies that charge, upwards of $2,000 now. That we've done this, again, inadvertently. We didn't intend to do this, but because the test is placed where it is, that's what's ended up happening, so.
Thanks. That budget explanation helps me.
I just have really quick, thank you. I know it's been a long day, but I want to make sure, Dr. Horn, I'm really happy that you're joining us, but I want to convey as a member of this board that I share in the feelings that Mr. Fu shared earlier from the academics at the University of California and at USC about making that, I believe that ASPPB has not made a strong enough case for consumer protection on this matter. And I need ASPPB to do that to help me when I need to respond to stakeholders about why we are considering this in the future. That's very important.
So can I ask you what would help you see a strong case? Because as I think about it, I think, don't we want to know that our people not only know what to do, but they will do it?
What is the research outside of ASPPB to support that? What data points out from the academic space of psychology support that? It may not, and it actually may not even be in psychology. It might even be in education and licensure examinations and their purpose. But I would like for ASPPB to not just tell me that there's a need for skills tests, but to demonstrate to me why that is. Because we have we have a group of stakeholders who are also researchers in psychology. And while I don't want to get deep into the weeds of an academic debate, I need to be able to respond to stakeholders. So I'm just going to, leave
Yeah,
that right there?
let me just say one little thing, and then I'm going to bring this back to ASPPB as well, because the question keeps being asked by people. So I'm going to say it's analogous to a driver's test. We have to take a written test and we have to take a driving test. This is the action part. The driving part is the part 2. And we want to know, predictive validity, which is really what folks are talking about here in the academic world. It's not appropriate for this kind of exam. Our base rate is so low of complaints. For example, we have 20,000 licensees. How many complaints do we get a year, and how many go forward in terms of accusations? We might get 700, 800 complaints a year, but how many do actually go forward into an accusation, right? It's a very small base rate of, so we can't find a good criterion. This isn't like other kinds of research that we might do or other kinds of things. So what we're trying to do is capture what best tells us this person is ready to practice safely.
Do we have evidence that the complaints that come into all of us jurisdictions that are part of ASPPB are being addressed in this assessment?
Absolutely. Because one of the things the item writers use, one of the things we've made available to the item writers are the complaints all disidentified, so not to scare anybody or anything, so de-identified, but the kinds of behaviors that psychologists engage in that get them discipline. And we use those to ask questions in the EPPP.
So if you can take back a message to better elevate that narrative, because when I review these items as an educator, I am thinking about the exam, and I'm thinking about how is it connected to, what is the problem we're trying to solve, and how is it connected? And I think about my own, the stakeholders that I have as a board member here. What are some of the questions and some of the concerns they have? And do I have, as an educator, my profession, the confidence that this is, so I need help with that. But now, just a second concern I have is on this matter of skills that this second part of the exam is seeking to address. What, and you don't have to answer me now, but I'd like to know what ASPPB, what plans it has to outreach to programs of psychology to help get the word out to students coming up that there may be a different type of preparation, or that the faculty there might need to provide a different type of training to get to that other issue about if students are taking it closer to their graduation date.
You're talking about the part 1 now. The knowledge part.
Oh, that's right, because the skills would be later. But either way, that they learn that skill through their program. How is ASPPB connecting to the programs? What type of outreach to the programs of psychology? Where are those connections?
So I'm one of the connections to all the psychology graduate programs in the US and Canada. There's an ASPPB board member who's another one of the connections. We go to all the training council meetings. We talk to all the trainers, the directors of training in all the psychology graduate programs in the US and Canada. We talk to them about what's coming up. I will tell you, we just had an EPPP exam committee for the Part 2. They just finished the practice exam for the Part 2, so people will be able to take the practice exam. We have already practice exams for the Part 1. They'll be able to take practice exams for the Part 2. So the word is getting out. Graduate students in psychology know about this. They know it's coming, and
It would help the narrative to have some more information about that, and what are some of the examples that some of the programs are doing. Maybe they're having an in-service, a special PD to prepare students, to think about that.
So can I just interrupt a second? I don't know what the programs are doing themselves, because ASPPB doesn't get involved in that. Our members are you, the boards of psychology. Our members are not the training community. So all we do is bring it to the training community.
Excuse me, let me just like rein it in a little bit, sorry.
Wait, Dr. Kasuga, please. So what I'd like to do is, there's a lot of conversation going on, but we need to take a 5-minute break.
Sure.
So we're going to take a break, take last comments from board members, so for public comment, okay? So give us 5 minutes, and we'll reconvene. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Break, thank you for, thank you. We are back from break. Thank you for being very quick to everyone. Ms. Purto, can you please call the roll?
Oh, there it is. Kasuga.
Here.
Cervantes.
Here.
Fu.
Aye.
Harb Sheets.
Here.
Nystrom.
Here.
Phillips.
Hi.
Riscate.
Wow.
Sorry, Riscate? Here. Thank you. Rogers.
Here.
Tate.
Here.
Roll is complete.
Thank you. Quorum is established. We're going to jump right back in for final board comments with just this caveat that we are going to be revisiting this several times. This is not the one time we have Dr. Horn and this subject, so it will be on the agenda of our May meeting as well. But final board comments, please.
I wanted to talk about, as part of this agenda item, I just wanted to give an update to the public and to the whole board that this is going to be an ongoing, that our board will have an ongoing engagement with ASPPB on some of the issues that the stakeholders have presented to us in past meetings, and I just wanted to enumerate 3 of them. I believe one would be the cost, which Mr. Fu brought up. We're going to continue to advocate for lower cost, and it's going to be ongoing until we keep it low for our stakeholders. The second one is on test equity. We talked about making sure that the test will take into account racial disparities as much as we can be controlled by the exam. And I know that they've provided us in one of the supplemental information that we have on our materials, some of the things that they've been doing with regards to item differential evaluations. I'm not saying that right, but it's something to that effect.
Differential item functioning?
Yes, differential item functioning. And to make sure that on every area that California can make a difference, I believe that California licensees comprise a big portion of licensees and membership with ASPPB. And one of the things that I am concerned about is when they talk about diverse item writers, do we have California people in that group? Do we have, when it comes to the examiners, the expert examiners, subject matter experts, do we have California? Because I think that our definition of cultural competence may be different from other states or other kind of jurisdictions in Canada. It's really broad, country, and we have different jurisdictions, and I want California represented in those, so I'd like to know those. I'd like to know the results of the ongoing evaluation of the exam, including making sure that OPES, our own evaluation of the exam like we usually do frequently. So I want to make sure that we keep on addressing those stakeholder questions, even though we're moving towards adopting, because we made a decision in 2018 that we either have to adopt this new competency EPPP with the 2 parts or create our own tests. So those are our 2 options, but without necessarily giving up on making sure that we have the best test if we're going to adapt a test, that we're addressing those concerns that the stakeholders brought up with regards to validity, the cost, and racial inequities. So that's going to be an ongoing process, and we're going to also discuss that with the ad hoc committee.
Thank
So,
you.
do you-
Dr. Horn?
Just to some of your questions, and of course this is ongoing, and I think it's spoken to in this document of the facts. It says these are going to be ongoing things, so they're not ending, particularly the racial disparities, with differential item functioning or item review panel. That's every single question on both exams, the EPPP Part 1 and Part 2. The other piece is, and I think you've been told this before, we have California item writers, we have California subject matter experts on our item development committee and on our exam committee. And actually, one of the people on the exam committee, Emil Rodolfo, used to be on this board of psychology. So we do have California representation, and we have a very diverse representation on all the committees and groups associated with the EPPP. So just to let you know that, and that shouldn't change. Yeah.
Thank you. Final board comments before we move to public comment? Go ahead.
I just want to wrap what.
Wait, hold on. Dr. Phillips was going. But go
I
ahead.
just want to mention a couple things just to give some context to this. I think Matt Turner has actually told us, or Dr. Turner's already told us, that California has a very large representation among the item writers and a very diverse group of California psychologists. So I understand that's an ongoing concern, but I think that ASPPB hasn't been addressing that. Competence is different than knowledge. Historically, when people got licensed as a psychologist in California, they took an oral examination, which was taking their knowledge and applying it to practical situations. We had to do away with that, in part because the validity and reliability of doing that particular test, depending on which panel of people you sat in front of in a hotel room, might I add, it just turned out to be a mess, and we got sued over it, and we had to drop it. So we do need, I think, a competency evaluation, and I don't think we can rely on the training community evaluations to do that, because psychologists tend to be too kind in their evaluations of their trainees. The second thing I wanted to mention was that creating a licensing exam is different than creating other types of psychological examinations. How validity and reliability is measured is completely different in the licensing realm. To a certain extent, the objections that I'm aware of from some of the traditional academic institutions in the state are based on psychological principles that don't apply to licensing exams. So it's great that they have a critique, but the critique is like over on Mars when we're talking about the moon. So I just think they're opposed to it, so I think they're finding a way to fashion an argument to get to it. The third thing is, I just want to remind the board that there is a drumbeat of inevitability about the EPPP2. In my mind, that may be, the board may decide that they're not going to adopt it, and then I think we've got a whole lot of problems. I think some of these concerns, like price and everything, they are important concerns for our stakeholders, but if we want to retain licensing reciprocity for our licensees in the state of California, I don't know that we're going to have much choice between the EPPP2 or whatever we're calling. I forget the name's changed, hasn't it? I don't know, the revised EPPP, whatever it is.
It is it will be the EPPP. It has two parts.
Okay. So as a practical matter, if we decide to go in another direction, in all likelihood, our licensees in the state that took that other exam that we rely on are not going to have licensee mobility. And I think that's going to be a disaster. So, I mean, I'm a little, I'm not entirely happy with the EPPP in its revised form, but I think they've done the best job they could do under the circumstances. There have been problems with the rollout, but I just want us to keep in the realm of kind of reality, and that reality is if we make the decision not to adopt the EPPP in its new form, then we got a whole hell of a lot of problems. So that was my comment.
Thank you. I know Dr. Cervantes wanted to.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that these 2 points are not lost, just keeping in this conversation. The importance of that link to consumer protection and any anecdotes about some of the conversations and discussions that you've been having, Dr. Horn, on curriculum, with the programs. What are they doing? How are folks adapting? Those would be beneficial towards the narrative about this change in examination. Thank you.
Just one thing, I appreciate your comment. I'm going to bring it back. I just want to position ASPPB. We don't talk to training programs about their curriculum. So
I know,
not
but I'm the member, and right, like we're the member here.
Yeah.
We're the stakeholders, and I asked if there was a connection, and you said that there was. And so, like, what's happening with that? Tell me more about it. Not right now at this moment, but have that be part of the narrative.
Okay.
That is an important outreach that ASPPB is doing.
The reaching out to the training community, is that what you're saying?
Academic community.
Yeah.
To the academic community.
I'm not asking for a survey or a focus group. Just an update of what that is for me,
For
the
you.
stakeholder.
Mm-hmm.
Not like me personally, but for all of us to understand how it's connecting back to that pool of applicants that are coming up.
Okay, I think I understand what you're asking for. I'm not sure, but if I don't get it right, you'll let me know.
Probably.
We're going to be talking about it. So. Are there any more board comments before we move on to public comment?
I think we can move on to public comment.
Okay. Thank you for your support down there. Opening public comment. If you have a comment, please step forward. Dr. Winkleman, welcome.
Hi, thanks for, I want to thank you, Dr. Horn, for the information presenting here and to the board for their attention to this. Obviously, this is a topic that has been discussed a lot, will be discussed a lot, and I appreciate that. There's just a couple of discussion points that I wanted to follow up on. One is just to acknowledge that many of our members and many psychologists and psychology students do have a lot of concerns about this. I think it's important that we also consider respectfully the views of our training community who do certify their trainees and have 3,000 hours of training that's supervised and that's regulated by this board, and also of the academic community who do know about test development. And I realize, Dr. Phillips, there is a distinction between a licensing test and other tests, but that doesn't mean that academics would not have relevant points to make who really have expertise in test development in addition to that they might not, that they would have relevant comments to the development of a licensing exam as well as other types of exams. So I think it's important to really acknowledge those communities and the concerns that they have. I also feel like it's important to acknowledge this is a major added burden to our trainees. Even if they're going to take the test closer to the time of the knowledge acquisition, chances are many of them are going to spend the money to still take the exam prior to taking the exam. And if it's in two parts and it's not one test, and they are going to spend more money and they're going to spend more time. And this is a time when largely people are trying to decrease the barriers to entry to the mental health profession, and I think it's important to acknowledge that as well. And in terms of following up on what Dr. Cervantes has mentioned about the validity, but also about just the communicating the need. I've read much of the ASPPB's materials, and I understand the rationale. But I do think it's important to convey the need. And for example, if some jurisdictions have a Part 1 and Part 2, is there any change in the rate of complaints from when they go to having Part 1 only to the rate of complaints when they have Part 1 plus Part 2? If the base rate is so tiny that you can't tell the difference between Part 1 and Part 2, then I think it's hard to describe to our stakeholders what's the value then. Why is it, what is the problem we're trying to fix? If the base rate is so tiny that there's no difference if you implement, no discernible difference if you implement Part 2 or in addition to Part 1, when it's causing really a burden to our students who have many times over 100,000 and much more in debt coming out. It's a big deal to them. So I just wanted to mention those points because there are various ideas have been coming around. I know we're going to have more opportunity, and I do appreciate the concept of the EPPP Part 2, but I do think that there are some really difficult aspects of it for many psychologists and students in the state.
I'll just say one thing to your, not to get in the weeds, but, talk about the low base rate, et cetera. People don't they don't get in trouble right away. We have the best knowledge, and I'd say the best, I don't want to say the best skills, but our most broad skills at the point of licensure. People start getting in trouble after they've been licensed 10 years or so, right? That's kind of.
Do we have data about?
We've got plenty of data about that. Yeah.
Well,
so again, not to get in the weeds, but I am just saying I think there is a misunderstanding about particularly predictive validity as something that to pursue prior to development of this exam or having this exam. There aren't good criteria. That's all. And again, not to get in the weeds, but.
Well, I hope it's being, in any case, I hope that it is being measured. And I guess those boards will have the data. They do collect the data to what the rates are and what they're not. And then this goes back to Dr. Cervantes' question, raising of what if the base rates are so low, how is that demonstrating? It's harder to demonstrate the need to people that are unhappy about it and are questioning it from that perspective. And that's a little different than the maybe more academically oriented people who have other concerns about it. And I think both are things to be continued. I know they're being addressed, but to continue to be addressed.
Yeah, and if I could just say one thing, and because I don't want it to be a back and forth so much. I think it's really, in terms of thinking about it, from ASPPB's standpoint, this is a more complete exam. It does take the place for many jurisdictions of their oral exam, the exam that they use. So it's a more complete exam. It gives both in a standardized fashion, the knowledge part and the skills part. And I think that's how ASPPB has conceptualized it, as opposed to we're trying to fix a problem. I mean, the problem was we only are measuring this one piece, and we know these other ways of measuring haven't been very good or haven't been very adequate.
Dr. Horn, can I take this time to say thank you? And Dr. Winkleman, thank you. And I do hope that CPA is going to be very active in the process and come to the committee meeting in April, because obviously, again, this is a conversation we'll be having.
And I know there were some people from the training community who were not able to attend today, and also from the academic community who were not able to attend. So
They will
I
have
think it would be
opportunity.
helpful to have their expertise here as well. So
Absolutely.
hopefully they'll be able to participate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. We're going to move on to agenda item number 24, the consideration of any written comments and responses and possible adoption of 16 CCR sections, bear with me, 1391.1, .2, .5, .6, .8, .10, .11, .12, and 1392.1. Mr. Glass-Steagall, please.
Thank you, President Tate. This rulemaking file brings the board in compliance with the changes enacted by Senate Bill 1193 from 2016, Senate Bill 574 from 2017, and Senate Bill 801 from 2021. The amendments to the board's regulation will clarify the requirements of delegated supervisors and will update the regulation and renewal process, including 2 new forms which are being incorporated by reference. This package was noticed for the initial 45-day comment period on June 7th, 2022. The comment period for this rulemaking file ended on August 2nd, 2022. During this comment period, the board received no comments. On September 14th, 2022, the package was noticed for a 15-day comment period as staff requested to add and delete underlying documents from the rulemaking file, ensuring that the correct minutes were referenced. The comment period for this correction to the rulemaking file ended on September 30th, 2022, and the board received no comments. Staff recommends that the board adopt the regulation text with no changes with the following motion. Adopt the text as noticed, delegate to the executive officer the ability to make any technical or non-substantive changes to the text in order to secure final approval from the Office of Administrative Law. And I apologize, it was technical or non-substantive edits to the text in order to ensure final approval from the Office of Administrative Law. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Madam President, so moved.
We go second, moved and seconded. Any board comment, please? Thank you. Any public comment regarding agenda item number 24? Please come forward and have a seat. I'm not seeing any movement. We have a motion and a second. Ms. Bruteau, can you please call the roll?
Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harb Sheets.
Aye.
Nystrom.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Riscate.
Aye.
Rogers.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Glass-Steagall. We are going to jump to agenda item number 28, election of officers. Ms. Marks, please.
Thank you, Dr. Tate. It has been several years since I've assisted the board in this task, so I'm a little rusty at it, but if memory serves, what we have done in the past is taken nominations for the office of either chair or president, taken all those nominations and then gone through the board members, and if there's more than one, have the board members indicate their vote on who they would be electing. And then we would do the same for either vice chair or vice president. I believe that's how we've done it. Let me back up. After we've taken all the nominations, before there's a vote, there's of course a chance for public comment. And to remind the board, nominations do not need a second. A person can nominate themselves. And I believe according to the board's administrative manual, the term of office is for the next calendar year. So these would be the nominations for the president and vice president for calendar year 2023. So that's, as I said, how memory serves, that we've done it in the past. If the board would like to make any comments on that or offer any changes, we can do that as well. Okay, and I believe in the past, we've done the office of president first. So with those comments, I would open it up for nominations for president for the calendar year 2023.
I nominate Dr. Leah Tate.
Actually didn't. Oh, okay. So, I said I'm rusty. So there's been a nomination for Dr. Tate for the office of president. Are there any other nominations for the office of president for 2023? Okay, then I think the board would be voting on that, but before the board takes a vote, I would ask for any public comment. I see none, so I would ask for Mr. Glassbeagle, have you been taking roll? Oh, I'm sorry. To take roll on the nomination for Dr. Tate to serve as president of the board for 2023.
Kasuga?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Harb Sheets? Aye. Nystrom?
Aye.
Phillips?
Aye.
Riscate?
Aye.
Rogers?
Aye.
Tate?
Aye.
Okay. With that, then I think we move on to the office of vice president. And the process is the same. We would open it up for nominations for vice president. Those nominations do not have to be seconded.
Madam Council, I would like to nominate Dr. Shakanda Rogers for vice president.
Dr. Rogers, I see no objection coming from you, so okay. Are there any other nominations for vice president for 2023? Okay, I see none. Are there any comments from the public? I see none. Would you take roll, please? Thank you.
Kasuga? Aye. Cervantes?
Aye.
Fu?
Aye.
Harb Sheets?
Aye.
Nystrom? Aye. Phillips?
Aye.
Riscate?
Aye.
Rogers?
Aye.
Tate?
Aye. Congratulations, Dr. Rogers.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Fu for his service as vice president.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
And just for the record, you're not going anywhere for a minute, so you're still here.
No, but I get to join Dr. Phillips and the backbenchers, and it's going to be a fun ride.
No. So we're going to take up agenda item 29, recommendations for agenda items for future board meetings. The board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. And I'm opening that to the board.
I have to add my usual recommendation of adding a mindfulness activity at the start of our meeting.
You got it.
Mindfulness for the Vice President Rogers, right? Any other board suggestions? I'm opening this up for public comment. If you have a suggestion for a future board meeting, please come forward and have a seat. Okay, I don't see any movement. But before I do adjourn this meeting, we have a big thank you up here with us today, and this is for Noreen Marks. This is not her first, not her second, but this is her third time coming back to the Board of Psychology to assist us with the transition of our new board council. So thank you. And she has stepped out of retirement to assist, so that's a huge deal. And she will be officially done helping us in December. And so we have a gift and a card for you, so thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Fu has something to say.
I just want to say, Ms. Marks, thank you so much for your wisdom, your insights, and I always refer to you as the 10th member of the board, even though you would probably be chagrined to hear that. But your wise counsel through this year and many years before have always been welcomed and always so thoughtful and expertly guiding us through a lot of difficult issues. So thank you so much, and we wish you a happy retirement again.
Any other comments before I officially adjourn this meeting from Ms. Marks?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much. As it was for 15 years or so, my great honor and pleasure to serve the board.
Thank you so much. And I am officially adjourning this meeting. Thank you for sticking it out with us. I don't need a motion, I thought. Do I? I don't.
need a motion to adjourn, right?
I move to adjourn.
Okay. We don't have to discuss it. Okay, Dr. Phillips solved it. We are adjourned. Thank you to everyone. Noreen says we don't.
Oh, you don't?